that the work session started tonight. This is May 8th, 2017. It's 4:30 PM. We're going to have a couple presentations, some proclamations, a mayor's award. And number 4, we have a public hearing for consideration of budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. Steph?
Okay. Eric's going to put up the resolution that you guys will approve next week for the budget amendment. This was also published in the Hawkeye as required on May 4th last week. So we'll just quickly go down the differences from our original FY17 budget and what we need to amend. On the revenue side, we're amending, Waterworks is having a little bit more revenue than what was budgeted, so that's the 600,000 in charges for services. 10 million, that's the bonding that we did in the refinancing we did. So that big $7.1 million bond, we didn't have that in our budget to refund because of course we don't even know we're going to do it until basically that day. So, and then we did end up bonding a little bit more than we had budgeted. 2.5 million was for the other bond. That was almost 10 million. We only had budgeted 7.5. So, and then we, based on some of other activity within the city, we're increasing our transfers by 870,000. And that's just transferring within different funds. So that makes up the 11.4 million of revenues that we're increasing. On the expenditure side, you can see all the expenditures are listed by function. If, Eric, you want to pull it down just a little bit. Public safety, basically, that includes overtime, first and fire, also police. We've an increase in the U.S. Bank building expenses that we hadn't budgeted. Those are the taxes that we're paying. Also, the 3 new officers that we just hired a couple weeks ago, and then they're going to the academy next week, or today, I guess. So that makes up the increase in public safety. Public works, a couple of things, an increase in engineering. We ended up putting a fuel system in that wasn't budgeted for this year. And then the depot expenses that we're incurring. And under general government, they're kind of miscellaneous, 26,500. We got a printer to print out our new IDs, some temporary labor, and some city hall repairs. Makes up that number. And then our debt service, that again, that 500,000, that's to pay off the bond June 1st that we refinanced. So sometimes those go in escrow, they never go in and out of our books. This one didn't though, so we received the bond proceeds and now we'll have to pay out that amount on June 1st, the $7 million. And then there was some increased in fees also because our bondings, both amounts were pretty high this time. So on culture and rec, basically what's causing that increase is just a difference in the way we're budgeting for the auditorium. It's not that the auditorium is costing us more, it's just we're putting in all the revenues and all the expenses. Now, in FY18's budget, we did that, so we shouldn't have another amendment for FY18, but in 17, we still were kind of doing that net amount of what's it gonna cost. Well, we really need to have all the revenues in there and all the expenses. So that increased by about 200,000. And then the other ones are just basically our trust expenses. So this is where people have donated money for a certain program, let's say forestry. And so we hold that money in one of our trust funds. And so it's really hard to budget those because year to year, you know, a year before they're going to spend the money to estimate how much they're going to spend. So these is where we go through now and we say, okay, here's what we've spent out of these funds along with any other encumbrances we have. So that's like the swimming pool trust, Little League, the North Gorge Trail. They're just kind of all miscellaneous. And then under the business type, basically we've had the sewer mainline repair that wasn't budgeted. And then a couple of other minor amounts for the 195,000 that we're increasing in business type. And then our transfers of 870,000. Does anybody have any questions on the budget amendment?
I think we're good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Number 5.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
Number 5, consideration of 2017 amendment to urban renewal plan for Burlington Consolidated Urban Renewal Area. Mr. Tisland.
It's just a brief summary that we previously amended the urban renewal plan to add the Apollo High School site into the urban renewal area and into our plan. The plan at that time was designated for demolition. Since we do have a offer to purchase and redevelop the building, we need to amend the plan to state that it is, I guess the plan is to redevelop the building, convert it into residential units. And then I think one consideration was going towards using the property tax, the neighborhood redevelopment property tax abatement for this property, which it's currently not in that downtown property or tax abatement area. It would need to be added in order to consider that use instead of in lieu of TIF funds, so.
So how are the negotiations coming with this whole project? Can I ask that question now, or shouldn't I?
You can ask that. We had created a development agreement comparable to what, when we did the Manor site, how that sale agreement had gone and the development agreement that was with that into the current terms, essentially selling the building for $100,000. When we initially proposed it, we were doing it as we'd set it out in our request for proposals with a 15-year TIF rebate, in essentially providing a building that was going as is, and I think we had some pieces in there for making our best efforts on assisting them with the asbestos removal. I think we have the ability to help them, at least getting some state funding towards the cleanup on that. It's capped at $25,000.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And that's on a dollar for dollar expenditure, well, 50%. If you put in $25,000 on a $50,000 project, the state will pay the other $25,000. Those terms, we haven't had any comments come back, and Jesse could confirm. I haven't heard anything from, in regards to the Apollo offer with the development agreement, that there are any issues with it. We did talk to the developer after our meeting. Tim, you had mentioned the idea of tax abatement would be preferable, and we talked with him about the pros and cons of the two different ways. It was something that we talked about with him. The TIF rebate on a 15-year rebate would be for about $32 out of the 40-some dollars that are paid on our county levy, or our local levy with the county school and city included. So if you had the development occurring all at once immediately, there would be a larger reimbursement to him up front, or better deal for that on a 15-year basis. We talked with him about if you have a process where his development was going to occur in stages, which is kind of what he is talking about, the tax abatement might be a better deal for him. And that's really was up to him to kind of make a determination on. The TIF rebate would be a fixed 15-year period that would begin immediately. The tax abatement, if we were to amend the district to where he had that more aggressive 10-year abatement schedule over into that property, would allow him to do in phases and get that 10-year schedule for each phase of the project. So if it was staggered over 5 or 6 years for the work being done, he would be able to get the full 10-year advantage on each phase, and that would be the full tax abatement, the 40-some dollars levy as opposed to the 32. He's, from our understanding, and we modified the agreement based off of this, would prefer the tax abatement. Given the timing issues, that makes sense to him. So there isn't really a TIF rebate that's going with this. We are looking at, though, this is a TIF project in terms of the ability to allow us to sell the property using TIF favored rules. It gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we dispose of property. That's a long answer to your question.
So right now, it's in his ballpark.
Right now, it's in his ballpark, and everything we've heard is he's happy with, or satisfied with what we're doing. We're moving forward. We have 2 separate hearings that have to be held on this. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, I believe so,
Um,
yeah.
One to add the project, and then one for the sale of the property through the development agreement. The first hearing will be adding the project to the urban renewal, which is what we're doing now on this public hearing. And the public hearing on the June 5th meeting would be for the development agreement, including the sale of property for $100,000. With that, we're in that process, that separate piece, we do have that open to other proposals to come in. I think the due date on that is June 1st, if that's a Thursday. I think that's correct. Where we could at that public hearing have competitive proposals come in for the redevelopment of that site. That would be very simple, that'd be the same thing that we did with the Manor property sale.
You know, maybe somebody could explain to me, I wasn't on council, I don't think, when you approved that downtown rebate thing. So how does that
So
work?
the tax abatement for the we have about 100 block area that includes downtown and the South Hill neighborhood. Do you have a picture of that to put up?
So, yeah.
This area was approved for enhanced tax abatement. The rest of town has 2 standard options, and it has a 10-year graduated tax abatement that is, do you know the percentages?
80, 70, 60, it rolls down, it equals 440% over 10 years.
Or you can do the 3-year 100% tax abatement. Within this
So the
area,
blue outline, there's a few things on this map, but the blue outline is the neighborhood development urban renewal area that this applies to.
So within that area, tax abatement can be requested on a 10-year basis. The first 7 years are 100% abatement, the 8th year is 75, 9th year is 50, and the 10th year is 25%.
Wow.
When that was done, that was, the council had been, well, you were involved with one project in the downtown area where we did I think a 15-year TIF rebate that never actually went through because the project didn't occur.
Yeah, they didn't do it. Yeah.
But the council after that had a discussion about, rather than, their discussion at that point was, no, let's not be picking winners and losers with some of the comments, and let's have a tax abatement program instead.
Okay.
Where you have one set policy
Yeah,
that
one
any
policy.
developer could have. There was a discussion at that point whether that should be for downtown area or for citywide. When we looked at this and presented this area at that point, there are a couple of communities that have something comparable to this. Davenport would be one. If you look at their policy, the timeframe, the abatement on that 10-year basis and the percentage by years, this matches that. They do their downtown corridor, or their downtown area, and then they have 2 highway corridors. One that extends north out of the downtown area. I'm not familiar with the other one to be able to suggest where it is, but what they've done is targeted areas that are, that need redeveloped. The other communities that we saw were typically doing that as well. The majority of communities that anyone that had an expanded or abatement schedule like this were saying, how do we do this in targeted areas where development is not occurring? And we need to do something that's far above what the traditional tax abatement does.
Okay, all right.
Again, even at that time, there was an argument over whether this should be citywide or not. But regardless, when Tim suggested the idea of expanding the downtown area, this would be what's up on the board in red hashed would be the idea of expanding that tax abatement plan to include that area as well. and the developer is certainly willing to do that. We don't have to do the tax abatement, get that in place by June 5th, but we do need to be working on it as we move forward.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to explain that to me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, council.
Everybody else is good. Okay. Number 6 is a public hearing for a consideration of an amendment to ordinance number 3403, an ordinance creating the Arbor View Estates PUD. It's going to be the first reading on that one. Mr. Tisdale.
This is a request by Scott Zeiser, developer of the Arbor View Estates. This was previously approved for a PUD and preliminary plat last fall and winter, I believe it was, to do a new residential development north of Sunnyside off of Cliff Road. The previous plan, as shown here, I guess he's requesting a few changes to the plan that was approved. Included 14 zero-lot line duplex condo developments, where each side of the condo is on its own lot. The 15th lot was a single-family lot that had an outlot on the corner of the cul-de-sac, and the road went to the north property line and dead-ended with a detention pond on the south. So a lot of the changes are based on, or a lot of the amendments to the BUD are based on changes that he's requesting in his development. Like I said, as he got further along in the development stages and laying out the property, doing some more survey work and other things, he's requesting to add 2 additional lots on the east side, lots 15 and 16, to the condo development. That would wrap partly around the cul-de-sac, having lot 17 that was previously an outlot become a buildable single-family lot, expanding the detention area to the south on his property to cover all the required detention, as well as having an outlot to the north property line for future street development with a cul-de-sac at that location. So a couple points within the ordinance that this preliminary plat would have to come back to council as well, but we have to go through the rezoning first to make any changes to the rezoning so that this plat would conform to that. So the changes in the PUD ordinance would be going from 14 to 16 attached units on the eastern and southern border of the development, modifying some of the setbacks to fit within this area, primarily on the front side of the development. It does get tight around the cul-de-sac, so reducing the front yard setback from 30 to 25 or 20, maintaining the 25-foot required rear yard setback for these lots adjacent to other properties, and then for lots 1 through 14, shifting the front and rear yard setback. So typically, the front yard setback on the street is 30 feet and the back is 25. His proposal would change the front yard setback to 25 and the rear to 30, so he's still maintaining the same setback distance, but just having more distance in the backyard. The other change is adding the requirement that a tree be placed in the front yard of properties, approximately 1 per every 100 feet. This would be on private property. And finally, the traffic circulation. The developer would maintain a letter of credit or other surety that the outlot connecting to the north, or to the north, would be installed should the property to the north develop, so that the outlot doesn't remain in limbo if the property to the north develops. Who's responsible? The concern was the adjacent lot owners being responsible for a lot that the developer could have put in at the get-go. So that's one requirement, as well as that some letter of credit or other surety that this road would connect to the north property line should the property to the north develop. The developer also did ask that sidewalks be waived on one side of the street, only required on one side of the street. That's not in the PUD. That wasn't recommended by staff or the planning commission. They both did not recommend that. So if you wanted to add it in, it would be an amendment to the PUD, but based on the recommendation and discussion, it's not currently in the PUD language.
It's going to be my question.
So it would take an amendment to add that waiver of the sidewalk out. But the planning commission, the changes as shown here, did vote 4-0 to recommend approval of the request to the city council.
Okay. You guys good? I'm good with everything, but I'm not good with the amendment on the changing for the sidewalks.
So that, yeah, that would take an additional amendment by council to add that in, so it's not currently in the PUD.
What was his justification for asking for that? Do you know?
Just reduced cost essentially is the big thing,
Yeah, and I talked to him, he talked too about it being a low-traffic area where
yeah.
he didn't think it was really that necessary. I kind of agree with him.
I can understand that.
I think Cliff Road currently just has sidewalk on one side of the street as well,
Right.
so some of the existing neighborhood based it on as well.
You guys good?
Sure.
Okay. Number 7, consideration of an ordinance rezoning the property locally known as 816 Valley Street from M1 Light Industrial to C3 Central Business District Downtown Mixed Use Zoning District. First reading. Mr. Tiffin.
It's a request to rezone the former Dial Building. The portion on the south side, as you see here in yellow, is currently M1 Light Industrial. There is a portion to the north that is currently C3, a small portion on Jefferson Street, Central Business District. This rezoning would make the entire property, as shown in yellow here, C3 downtown mixed use, which does allow commercial and residential use of the property. M1 does not allow any residential use, so the property could be redeveloped to include residential with this rezoning. The planning commission did vote 4-0 to recommend approval based on the planned use of the property to include residential location adjacent to the existing C3 district, which is to the east and north. And the current designation on the future land use map from the conference plan does show this area as downtown mixed use as well. So again, just requesting to rezone to allow better reuse of the property.
You guys good?
Do you know, do they have a plan in mind?
The applicants here, they're looking to do some residential, I think looking at different residential uses on the upper stories, I think at least, but
Okay.
this would allow residential or commercial use in the building.
You good?
Sounds like a good reuse.
All right. Next is a consideration of plans and specifications for the demolition of the property located at 715 Shaka Khan Drive, Burlington, Iowa.
This is the former Parkview Care Center located just south of Dankworth Park off of Madison Avenue and Shaka Khan Drive. The city did acquire this over a year ago, I believe. We're looking to abate the asbestos and demolish the building with plans to subdivide into 3 lots for sale as residential, single-family lots. Previously, there was discussion about whether moving forward with Apollo, that's kind of why it's been delayed a little bit. Those were going to be packaged as a demo project if that wasn't going to be redeveloped, but since the development came forward, we proceeded with Impact 7G in developing plans for the asbestos abatement and demolition, and looking to have bids received by June 1st, 2017, here this year, and I think the completion date by the end of this year.
Wasn't somebody looking at this building prior, or am I getting buildings mixed up?
I think there's been some interest, or not interest, but there's been inquiries into the building in the past.
Nothing more than inquiry.
Currently, it's zoned R1, single-family residential. I don't know that this current use could go back into this area, but based on the current zoning, but obviously could be considered for rezoning, is in a state that has a lot of mold and asbestos and a lot of issues with it. Cost by the Impact 7G shows $391,000. We did have a estimate from a local contractor a year and a half ago, closer to $200,000, so we're gonna kind of see what those bids come in at. Currently, we have over $305,000 in our fund for
Okay.
projects,
That's
so.
my question.
Yep.
Okay.
Council, you guys have any other questions?
Good.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have consideration of plan specs for the 2017 Agency Street Widening Project West End.
presentation.
Just this first one here. So you can see the project boundaries out here. Basically what the project entails is reconstructing Agency Road from West Burlington Avenue out to just short of Highway 61. A couple of the things we'll be doing in this, in addition to the reconstruction, that should be noted are the road will be widened from West Burlington Avenue out to just before the railroad tracks where it kind of necks down there, so that won't be an issue anymore. A new traffic signal will be installed to replace that temporary one out by Plaza West, which is pretty well needed. And then we will be replacing or installing a new sidewalk rather on the north side of the road, and we'll actually have a sidewalk crossing across 61 and then down to Walgreens where there's already some existing sidewalks, so we can connect kind of the corridor there. Next, and I guess the last thing that's worth noting here is we'll be installing a new rail crossing near the entrance to Lowe's and the Blood Bank. The existing one has a little bit of wear on it, but we're replacing it to make it a little bit smoother ride there. On the next slide, I have just a quick picture of what the widening will look like. The darker black line on the top and the bottom there is going to be the new road width, so it'll match, you know, everything as you move farther to the east. So you'll have 2 lanes in each direction and then a center turn lane each way. And that's that. The current budget is 1.4 million roughly. We have 2.2 allotted, and that is a RISE program, so it's an 80-20 match. Our portion of that is just under $500,000. But again, if the bids come in less, our match will obviously be less as well. Our tentative schedule, if everything progresses, is a mid-June letting. We'll receive bids at that point. We would start in early July and then wrap up in early November.
So what impact will traffic have in this regard then?
We would have 2 lanes open at all times.
Okay,
So it will be pretty congested in that overlap between when we have the roundabout going and when this is down. Currently, that'll be about a month if the roundabout takes their entire duration, but they're making pretty good progress out there. So hopefully we can get that down to where it's a
yeah,
couple of weeks, hopefully.
good,
The sooner the better.
okay.
My daughter asked me the other day, she said, "Who's the new guy with the cool hair?" I told her, I said, "It's me, it's your dad, you don't recognize me."
She's the first one that said my haircut's cool in the whole office.
I just wish I had hair, but all right. Any other questions for Jesse?
So does Mount Pleasant Street overlap here too, or are we doing that later?
No, Mount Pleasant Street will either be late fall or early next year. The way we're looking at it is it's going to be an overlay, and the current discussions we're having is, do we want to really open up another project in the fall with the, possibility of not getting it done and having everything closed for the winter? So
Yeah.
we're making that call as things progress on it.
Good move. Okay.
Any
You
other
guys good?
questions?
Thank you, Jesse.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next we have consideration of plans and specifications for the 2017 erosion mitigation at corner of North Street and North Fourth Street. Come on back down.
So this is a project, we had a rain event last fall where we had some localized flooding. The water went over the berm and we, had some sloughing and quite a bit of material washed down the bluff. Klinger was awarded the consulting position for this design. Initially, we were kind of going in the direction of a retaining wall, but they proposed a different option that, you know, we were all okay with, and that was the installation of these soil nails. And basically what it is, you can kind of see a depiction there. You have basically a really high-tech chain link fence that you're nailing back into the bluff. And the nails will be embedded in the rock and grouted in, so that the nails will be tied back, and then all this fencing will hold the berm up. So that's the direction we're going for this one. And you can see here, that shaded area down below, you can see where the road goes around. That shaded area is where they're planning on installing this, the soil nails and the matting. And then in addition to the soil nails, there'll be, go back. There'll be an overflow pipe in addition to the one that's there. So if there's centralized flooding, we'll pick that up and bring it down the bluff without all the sloughing and erosion. So, next, the estimated budget for this, I don't know if you guys were here or remember the initial budget for the retaining wall, but it was somewhere around $750,000.
Yeah, over 700,000, yeah.
Yeah, this we're thinking is 311,000, so,
3 cheers.
yeah. Claire came up with it, so we can't take all the credit. We just kind of steered them that direction when it became an option.
But what does that name mean?
Uh,
I know it's not applicable, but
I don't believe that we had
This
a
wasn't
budget
budgeted.
established for this project. So that's why I don't have much as far as tentative schedule, because it's gonna have to be, you know, a tough call whether we, you know, add this to the budget or figure out a way to get it in there, so I figured
It's-
there'd be
This is
way.
covered out, we have a miscellaneous sewer rehab account,
Oh.
and we did change how much we were gonna move over from sewer into the miscellaneous sewer rehab this year because of this project,
Moving a little bit more this year than.
moving more than what we had planned. But that's the account that we would use for unforeseen projects such as this.
Okay.
But again, this was something that we did not foresee having the kind of erosion that we had last fall occurring.
Any questions on this one? All right, thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Jason.
Okay, next we have a consideration of an ordinance amending section 137.08 of chapter 137 sidewalk regulations of the City of Burlington Municipal Code. Mr. McGregor.
The change before you is to change the sidewalk code that states that the minimum will be 50 inches. It restates that it'll be 48 inches, and then gives the Director of Public Works, myself, the authority to match existing in the areas. We do have some areas that are 36 inches, so where it makes sense to exist the matching. So it's a fairly minor change. I think we've had this conversation as to the reason why. It should be kind of moved back towards 48, so. Any other questions?
Nick, what assurances will we have that contractors will be putting in 48-inch?
Well, we make ourselves very available when people come in and fill out right-of-way permits, that we will go out and help measure to make sure that their sidewalk is compliant with our code and ADA compliance. So we state that very clearly when we meet with them. There is the problem sometimes that people replace sidewalk without getting the proper right-of-way permit. So that is probably the biggest chance that people run the risk of not installing the proper width of sidewalk. It is my opinion that 48 inch is absolute, and so if it's 47 inches, that sidewalk needs to be corrected to 48. But we are going to try and take every measure available to help make sure that the sidewalk is 48 inches wide on the front end. So.
All right. We good? Thank you, sir. Next, we have a motion for preliminary adoption of the second reading of an ordinance vacating and selling a portion of the Spruce Street right-of-way located west of South Main Street and a portion of alley right-of-way located north of Spruce Street and west of South Main Street, Burlington, Iowa. Mr. Tisland.
No changes from the previous reading. The adjacent property owner, Michael and Sally Campbell, have requested this vacation. They own the property at 223 Angular as well as 629 South Main. Looking to redevelop the property at 629 South Main, and this added space would benefit them. There is no through connection on Spruce Street, and this would maintain access to the property at 213 Spruce Street on the bottom of the map as well for their existing driveway. But this would be combined with the existing properties owned by the Campbells, and the sale price is listed at $3,000.
You guys got any problems with that?
No.
Okay.
Be prepared to waive the third.
Right on. Next, motion for a final adoption of an ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property in the Deer Point Estates urban renewal area pursuant to section 403.19 of the Code of Iowa.
No changes from previous readings. Again, sets up the ability to use TIF for the Deer Point Estates urban renewal area and Deer Point Estates subdivision. Still have a development agreement that will follow hopefully at the next meeting to set up the parameters for the use of the funds.
Okay, you guys good? All right, next we have a resolution approving the final plat. Leah
Hold on a
Zy-
minute. Nick had information.
Because it was brought up at the last council meeting, I wanted to show kind of a map of the sewer discussion that ensued because the concerns with this development. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to talk about it now, or I can talk about it at the end.
Let me wait till the, let me
Okay.
wait till the end. That's groovy with you. Okay, a resolution approving the final plat, Leah Zeiser subdivision.
Leah Zeiser owns property between Weimer and Dane Street, just north of Mount Pleasant Street. The area highlighted in red here with the YMCA being down on the bottom right corner of this map. Looking to subdivide this into 3 separate buildable lots, which is a minor subdivision, goes directly to council. Did the review on this development. There was a couple comments through the development review from the fire department. There's some concerns about the street on the west side. It is a 20-foot right-of-way, approximately 14 to 16-foot wide roadway coming up from Mount Pleasant Street. There is no turnaround at the end of all these fire apparatus turnaround at the end of the streets, including Dane Street and Weimer Street there. It is approximately 1,350 feet long from Mount Pleasant to the last driveway in the north, which exceeds our current requirements of 750 feet, which were not established with this development, but with this new subdivision. They had some concerns about that. New construction would be required to meet current fire code and likely require residential sprinkler systems. The street has no turnarounds. It's very narrow during a recent house fire on Domelin, a residential street similar to Weimer. There was some difficulty getting equipment to the site due to the narrow scenes, and as well there's some police vehicles that were blocked in. So they wanted to express the concerns based on the size of the existing streets, and just take that into consideration with the consideration of this plat.
You guys have any questions? Okay.
Can we go
Mayor?
back
Yeah. Which one do you want to go back to?
13?
I'm not paying attention to numbers. Yeah.
Let's go
You
back?
got a point?
Yeah, let's go.
Well, I kind of want to know where everyone stands, because I have a feeling there's going to be more of a discussion then than there just was. So I kind of want to know where everyone stands, what you've heard, emails you've gotten, articles you've read.
I was going to say basically the same thing. We've gotten, I know that decisions were made based on the information that was presented, and it was information that was at the time good information that was presented by Ryan. I think we found through information that has come since then that information is probably not as credible as we as it was when it was presented. I think the Gruen and Gruen study is flawed. It was done at the peak of the fertilizer plant development. There's 2,500 to 4,000 construction jobs that are no longer in the area. What RECI pointed out was that there were, the Gruen and Gruen said that we would have a net gain of 509 new jobs in the four-county area, a year per year for 10 years, from 2015 to 2025. In 2015 to 2016, we had a net gain of 8. If you read the report, you'd find that the reasoning for the proposal that is being offered for the development that Mr. Nagaraki is wanting to do is not as valid as what you would hope it would be as presented. It's not as presented.
Based on this other company that competes with Gruen, right?
Pardon me?
You're making that basis on this other group and their report that is critical of the primary report that we got.
You're absolutely right, that another developer commissioned that report. And I have no reason to believe that he would ask the company that done that report to falsify that information. All they did was point out that there was actually information that they had that was not available to Gruen and Gruen at the time that they done the study. And that there was some information that was available that was not presented in the same light that they would present it, I guess is the best way to say that. There's, I read it in detail. I'm not out to hurt anybody. If there's anybody in this town that's doing a development that I want to see succeed, it's Ryan Nagaraki. He has presented himself in the utmost professionalism. He's done his research, and he's presented the research as he got it. And there's been new information that's been presented since then, and I think that we need to take that into consideration.
I want to address that because I probably didn't read it as good as you apparently. I didn't go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but I read it, and what I got from the report was that some of the information really didn't apply the way I took it. With the construction workers, that was a big part of it, with the people that were working on the fertilizer plant. They were renters. I mean, they weren't buying homes. So I mean, to me, that report has nothing to do with the fact that we have people that need homes at this certain price. As far as the renting thing, to me, I didn't even consider that in the equation. As far as the job thing, I was going with the fact that I've had your son barking at, the council for 4 or 5 years saying, hey, I'm trying to find houses within a certain limit to get people in to be doctors, and then with the information that the other study had. And I'm not leaning either way. I think when it comes to a study, that there's always going to be variables, but what I was looking at was the fact that the fertilizer's here, the fertilizer's plant's gone. It doesn't really matter. If they were renters, we're talking about selling homes to people that were trying to get it to move into Burlington and stay, and I just don't. I think it's apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned on the study. That's just kind of where I'm at. Since everybody brought it up, I don't know where everybody else is. Are we gonna?
Well, I've been in support of this. I know it's a stretch. I'm really going to be concerned about the development agreement and how that comes up, assuming that this passes. And I think there's going to be some good discussions over what that's going to contain.
You have anything you want to, where are you at, Annie?
I still want this to go forward. I just have a lot of concerns based off of, there's a lot of very angry people at the idea of us doing this. So, I don't know, you know, and I'll say it again, and I'll always say it. I hear from 50 people who don't want it and 5 who do, and what is the population? Is there silence agreement or disagreement?
I gotta say this, though, Annie, every decision I make, there's angry people at me. So, I mean, when you're dealing with 24+ thousand people, there's always gonna be somebody mad.
Right,
you know,
no,
and-
I totally understand that.
Did you, Bob, were you gonna, oh, I thought you had something that you wanted to
No.
add in. Okay,
No, you've heard my spiel, I mean,
all right.
I just didn't know if anybody had any different
I didn't
feelings.
get, I really haven't got all that much extra stuff. I mean, I got a few emails, but, or a few emails, but, there's still a lot of people in support. It's kind of, could go both ways, and so you know, we just have to use the information we have and
Right.
try to make the best decision, I think.
Okay,
We're good?
yep.
Good. All right. Next, we have a resolution approving master facilities agreement, including addendum 1 with Interstate Power and Light Company. Mr. McGregor.
This resolution approves a master services agreement with, it says Interstate Power,
Alliant.
it's Alliant Energy. So we have some city-owned poles in the city of Burlington. Most of them, a majority of them are owned by Alliant. There are several of them that are bent, I should say a couple of them. The corner on Division as it curves around the corner by the railroad is one that got hit. And there's also one on Flint Ridge Business Park. This agreement allows us to contract with Alliant Energy, and Addendum 1 talks specifically about those 2 poles for the time and materials, come in and replace those poles. We have some of the equipment, but they are much more efficient at it in setting telephone pole, or light poles rather. We have a couple of them that were removed from the roundabout, that they're the exact same pole and light structure, so we'll just replace those 2, and that's what you see in Addendum 1. But the Master Services Agreement allows us in the future to add an addendum to it to have Alliant Energy be able to help us out with certain city lighting that we maybe are out of our element in replacing, so.
You guys good?
yep.
Thank you, sir.
Seems logical.
A, consideration of a proposal to enter into a Sioux revenue loan and disbursement agreement and a principal amount not to exceed $308,956.67. Mr. McGregor, back again.
This is an SRF planning and design loan for the Locust Basin. We had a previous P&D loan for the MASL sewer separation. In order to fulfill the contract, we needed more money, I guess, borrowed from SRF to be able to do that. So that's what you see for the 308, is the remainder to make up the balance for our contract with HR Green.
Sounds good. You guys good? Good. B is consideration of sale of property locally known as 1114 Linden Street, City of Burlington, with conditions. It's going to be a lovely home. Mr. Teslin, you got anything you want?
This will be a vacant lot that the neighbor's looking to purchase.
Lasted. We good? Okay, moving to discussion items. Dial Building nuisance abatements amnesty. Kelly Hall.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Kelly Hall. I've seen you all on the internet. Pleased to be here in person. Heard a lot from you about the TIF. I'd like a SIF, settled in full. So have a few letters about nuisance abatement. This has gone on for years. Most of the letters say, we're only going to send you 1 letter. That's all you're going to get from us this year. There's been tens of thousands of dollars in what I consider to be kind of a usury at 2% monthly, which is 24% per month on nuisance abatements. I see you're doing a lot for other properties in the area in forms of the TIF, with Apollo School, and those types of things. I'm here and I live in the city of Burlington now. I'm hiring all the workers there at the halfway house, and I need all the money I can get for that project. It seems like everybody's gotten quite a bit of tax advantages, grants, that type of thing. So I'm asking the city to go ahead and give me amnesty on all of the nuisance abatements going all the way back on my tax bill. Any questions?
And how much is that?
Well, that math is pretty exceptional. If we all want to get out our calculators, it's about 2% per month. That is compounded over time. And then, of course, it's behind a year because of how the accounting works with the tax assessor and the city. So it's quite a bit, but I have all the accounting on it.
So what was the number that,
They're still billing.
okay, am I thinking of something? What's the $32,000 number? What's it?
Oh, well, that's all of the taxes, but only some of that are abated. And it got quite confusing because I had 5 parcel numbers, and they changed my parcel numbers, so, if anybody wants to help unravel that, I'd love to have any suggestions.
City manager.
Oh, yes.
This is really a policy question for you. We charge for services, so I guess most of the fees are as we do, for example, with mowing. When we bid those out and they charge us, we pass those charges on along with, what do you do, like
Administrative
It's
fee.
$200 in admin fees.
It's
each time?
$100 for the first one and $200 for subsequent ones.
Well, I
That
have,
was something that, from the council's perspective, a couple of years ago, the only framework I can give you on this, I don't know of any time where you've waived something like this, not that you can't.
they have.
But from a policy perspective, a couple of years ago, the council asked us to increase these fees because you were trying to be more aggressive about dealing with the recurring nuisances and trying to create an incentive for people not to do this. However, you do have a request from a business owner asking you to, as part of her process of trying to do something with this facility, to waive these fees. That's really a policy decision from your
I've
part,
gotten
how you want to
charged
approach it.
$200 every single time plus the fee. So it wasn't $100, it's been $200 each time. And, I've asked for accounting records on this from the city. I've gotten a few records, but for instance, they charged me in 2017 over $1,000 for boarding up the building, and I can't see where they did that, and I can't get anyone to answer the phone or tell me that.
Oh, we've had to spend some time down there.
Mowing the lawn, and it's
For a long
$200.
time.
Yeah, it's $200 every time, $255 to $300 every time you mow a portion of, which really basically, I'm not even sure if I own that or not. Eric, I believe
You'd be
it's
responsible for the
for
progress.
the, okay, well, maybe Alliant and everybody who pulled out my gas line could have, been responsible to notify me when they took out on my gas line there. So, it's kind of a catch-21 situation. So you want me to be responsible for mowing something when, Alliant pulled out all my gas line, and nobody notified me then, okay?
That's Alliance deal. This is.
Yeah,
something
I'm
great.
not really sure.
That's
It-
Alliance,
it
that's
heated-
Alliance property.
From what, no, actually,
they
I'm not
can-
even sure about that. I was told it heated half of the buildings in downtown,
Yeah,
but,
well, that's Alliance property, that's theirs to deal with, not ours.
Yeah.
There is a responsibility by property owners, whether they bought the building or have a tax certificate.
Sure.
We've had police down there numerous times that you've never been charged for. We've had young people in and out of there and old people in and out of there. We've had
Old
people
people?
squatting in there, and it's been a real nightmare for the community. It's not even safe for our police officers to go in there and our
Oh,
fire department.
actually-
Would you let me finish talking, please?
yeah, I suppose,
They,
sure.
when they have an obligation to protect and serve, they also have an obligation, the chief has an obligation to protect his officers as well. And it's an unsafe building for them to go in and out of because of the different holes and weak floors and that sort of thing. It is a responsibility of the property owner to make sure that the building is secure and that people stay out of there. So it's, we've tried on numerous occasions to secure the building.
When
And then
would you like
somebody
me
would-
to address
Somebody
you?
would break into it again. the very next day. You've put new windows in there and people have
Sir?
already broken the windows out.
No, sir, they haven't. Which one would you like me to address first? Which statement?
I
Let me,
know,
let me,
I'm
let
just-
me
I'm
speak
just
now.
stating- I'm just stating my position in that I won't be supporting this. If you want to develop the building and you start developing the building and we can see progress, we'll find ways to help you get that accomplished.
Thank you.
But as far as your request to do
I heard you the
waive
first
these,
time.
Abatements, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I heard you the first time. So I'm going to address, I see that you have in your agenda Police Week. I don't know if this is Chief Beard, but I've actually spoken to him on the phone before. The only time I get phone calls over the years, and I've had the same numbers,
I just want to address, I don't want to address I don't want to open up those conversations. I just want to deal with the abatement, just with the request. I just want to deal just with the request.
okay, I just want to, rebuttal what this gentleman says.
Well, I mean, this is in court, so I mean,
Sure,
we're not going to get
yeah.
into that.
But this is the same guy that just said he would love to see somebody else succeed. Was it Apollo School or was it the urban
We're talking about the
redevelopment?
Dial building.
Yeah, I
right now,
know.
so
You'd love to see this person succeed, this other person, but you want to tear me down.
I'm not interested in tearing you
Yeah.
down, I'm just
Okay, well, that's what
responding
it
to your
felt like.
request.
So, I'm putting a lot of my own money into it. And, since you're really hoping for somebody else's success, thank you for your support. Appreciate that. Go ahead.
He did say, if you're putting money into it and you're developing, we're glad to work with you to help you get it developed. That's exactly your words out of your mouth, right, Mr. Scott?
Exact words.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your support.
We're good?
Anybody else?
You good? Thank you.
Thank you.
So or do we bring it forward as a resolution, or are we just gonna drop it?
I didn't see anybody that had support on. Okay, I don't have a consensus, so we can't move forward on that.
Bob, if you're wanting to consider approving her request, you would have to it would have to come forward at a council meeting, a regular meeting. If there aren't one or two of you that would like to see that project go forward, or that request go forward, there isn't a reason to put it on an agenda.
Okay, number 2, TIF policy.
Ron Gillette, 812 Dunham, Burlington, Iowa.
Wait. Hold on.
This is for number 2 TIF policy. Are you,
Tax income and financing.
But
is he
you're-
doing this?
We're not having a public meeting right now. This is a work session.
We're doing a TIF policy.
Oh, then there'll be no open discuss, because I'm looking at discussion items.
Not tonight, sir.
But not
That'll be
tonight,
next week.
no.
Okay,
Next-
then, other than that, may I please talk to you about something?
Not tonight, sir, that's at the council meeting, this is our work session tonight. And you're not on the agenda.
But this
We'll have to
is
get you on the
serious.
agenda, but if you want to get put on the agenda, or if you want to wait till after our council meeting next week, after next week's meeting, at the end of it, then you can come up with whatever comments that you have.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. TIF policy, who's doing that?
Just have the same, the memo, kind of going over outline of what Fairfield has done for their TIF objectives and policies, some of the strategies, goals that they've incorporated into their policy, additional items contained in the Fairfield TIF and other policies from other cities, highlight application forms, consideration of different efficiencies or designs, housing needs, infrastructure expansion and needs, whether it's targeting infill or blight, brownfield or growth areas. They often talk about minimum investment or improvement levels that the developer is expending, talk about rebate terms that council may consider. They also have reviewing the TIF policy. Some evaluate that on an annual basis to make sure it continues to meet the needs of the community and the council goals, as well as a statement that the policy does not obligate the city to use TIF funds for any or all projects that meet the criteria. Ultimately, it's up to the city council. But just for reference, the Fairfield policy was included to give some direction on what other communities have done and provide some guidance or framework for what could be considered.
So in terms of, from a staff perspective, as we tried to follow up with the request from council to have this as a discussion item, we tried to find, I mean, there were a few other policies that Eric had pulled up. I think the city of Marion, city of Johnston,
Yeah.
had much more in-depth policies than what Fairfield is. But they are also communities that have a lot more growth going on and a whole lot more activity that they're trying to coordinate. And I think they both have economic development departments that are actively managing a TIF program. And it doesn't quite make sense to look at a policy such as theirs. Just talking with Eric in regards to what kind of areas, if you were to consider a TIF policy on housing, what kind of areas do they see that make sense to have that discussion about? You know, typically, if a place is, if you're looking at a TIF program, and you kind of see it in Fairfield's policy, they have some general areas where they want to incentivize housing to get done in a way that it isn't naturally being done by the market. Whether that's for wanting to see incentivize more energy efficient housing units, which is one of their primary feeder categories that they have in there. Workforce housing is a category that they have listed and prioritized. They've chosen what kind of areas that they want to see occur. Another example, downtown blighted is an area that they've done. For us, as we look at what, from a staff perspective, what would make sense to consider, whether it makes sense to actually do or not, is really a policy perspective from you as a group. Your downtown area is one that could potentially be considered. Now, that would run counter to what you've done with tax abatement over time. So that kind of was one that we weren't really considering as one that you're looking at as a TIF policy that you're trying to accomplish. Infill housing is one of the categories that Fairfield had in theirs. We do have a couple of infill areas that aren't getting developed, and it would we could see the value of having that as a consideration, trying to get some of those infill areas developed. Then the other area, and the Fairfield policy identified a housing study that they'd had done, looking at the most recent housing study that we've had done by Gruen and Gruen, and looking at some of the categories for housing shortfalls that they've identified that aren't getting met by the market as it is.
Right.
And out of that, the areas that stand out is the 260,000 and below area. Really, even out of that's 180 to 260. I think some of the narratives in there talk about the lower priced housing, there is an adequate supply. Now, Councilmember Scott, you've been very forthcoming with the study from Mike Pearson that's talked about job growth hasn't matched what was in that study, in the Gruen and Gruen study. And I think that I would have to agree that I think that the estimates for new housing needs based off of job growth are probably higher than what they've shown. Out of that study, they talked about there being a need for about 140 units over the next 10 years in that 180 to 260,000 price range. But I think they're overestimating it. By how much, I don't know. They talked in that study about current housing needs of about 18,400 units for the region. They talked about there being 18,800 currently in existence, and a need just to maintain the existing housing stock, given that we lose a number of units over a period of time. They talked about needing over the next decade about 900 units just to maintain the existing housing needs for our existing population. They were talking overall another 1,200 units for growth. I don't see that 1,200 growth necessarily being a need. If you think over another 900 units, and they're saying about 50 are being built a year, there may be a need for 200 to 400 more units for maintain, a stable population over the next decade. How much do you need to hit? I don't know, because I think that some of the conversation that came up from the last meeting from maybe the mayor, I wasn't here, was maybe a specific number that goes into that. It would be less, if I were to say what the housing need is, I would think that it's less than what Gruen and Gruen has said, but what it is, I'm not really sure.
I
It
just
makes
thought
it,
maybe we can meet in the middle. That's what I was looking at. I thought we could, take two
Yeah.
numbers and and that would probably be close to what it actually is.
but that's really kind of, what do you want to see as a policy, if you want to see one? Are you looking to try to target a specific housing price range? Are you looking to not do anything at all? The one that makes, again, the one that makes the most sense to us from a staff perspective, there are some infill areas that aren't getting done.
Right.
Those make a lot of sense. When you talk about doing an expansion of housing, now you're, specifically the development that we're talking about on the south side, what's the housing shortfall that you're trying to address? How much of that are you willing to try to address? Is it,
But we got to do both. I mean, there's no getting around the expansion because some people, no matter how nice the house is, aren't gonna live in that infill on certain places. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's
Well-
why I'm even looking at that, or why I was originally looking at that. I'm just saying. I mean, I think there's gonna have to be both. We need to target infill, but we can't get away from expanding out as well. I mean.
Well, I'm not in favor of trying to put together a policy. I studied the law that allows all this, good Lord, but then I got the summary of what you can and can't do. The Fairfield thing, of course, I got a kick out of that. It gives you all this detail in there, but it goes on to say the bottom line, this is subject only to the approval of the city council. And I think that's what makes sense why you don't need a policy. The law is pretty well stipulates what you can and can't do. And I think as we address needs in our community, whether it's this council or 10 years from now, those needs are gonna vary and they ought to be addressed accordingly. And to me, to lock into a policy on something that's not that manageable to begin with, I think you're just making things more complicated than they should be. Just my opinion.
That was Wisdom speaking. How old are you, Monsignor?
Quiet, please.
Oh, yeah, my fault.
if,
But I hear you.
if you're gonna do it, and this is part of what he's speaking to, and if you look at Fairfields, and I don't know how well they're gonna keep up with this, but it talks about doing reviews of this and amending it over time.
Right.
If you're gonna have a policy in place such as this, you're gonna have to actively also be reviewing it and keeping up on it.
Right.
I've got to lean with what Bob said, though. If we don't need policy, let's try to not create any extra paperwork.
So then wouldn't basically anybody be able to come up?
I'd like the
And
number.
request it.
I'd like to put a number on it, and maybe a sunset date, but I'd like to put a number on it and address the need, call it done. I don't know what else you guys want to do.
I think it's fair to have some sort of a policy and have it reviewed. Yearly basis, every 2 years, because there does need to be some sort of guidelines for everyone. I
That's
just
what
don't
they
want.
got this for.
Well, yeah.
24 pages.
It's 24.
Good Lord, I mean, I don't know how you need any more information.
Right.
Well, does anybody else feel like we need more policy, or that we need?
Yeah, I
See on this?
don't, I'm not looking for Fairfield's answer. I'm looking for a direction that we're going to go. If urban sprawl is the answer for all of our development needs, then let's open up TIF to everybody there is and bring in all the new property we can to the area and fill it with housing. If our goal is to use infill development that is the most economical for for the community and build it to the standards that the original developments were built to and make it fit with an area, and that being impossible to be done without some kind of incentive, then let's offer that as an incentive in infill development. If we've got low to moderate income housing that we need in the community, then let's make TIF the target of that. But if we're not gonna do it that way, then let's just open it up and anybody can come in and ask for a TIF that wants it. And we can't base an earlier decision on the Gruen and Gruen study that says we're not getting these houses developed in this price points. Because the facts, if you get on GIS and you look at the developments that are most recently done, you'll find out that that's not true. That these houses are getting developed in these price points without TIF. 1419 Pawnee, 1413 Pawnee, 1418 Pawnee, 1400 Pawnee, 1443 through 1453. Now, those are condos, but all the first ones that I mentioned, the individual ones, are houses. If you go to Winchester and Cambridge, almost every house in that development is in that price point. So if you go to Diamond Ridge, there's one or two houses in that price point. If you go to the Lavender Lane development that Justin Myers is doing, there's two houses that have been built there, and there's more to be built that are in that price point. Mike Pearson's Deerfield, I know those are conjoined houses. Every one of them are under $238,000. They all fall into that price point. So we're getting houses built in that price point. So I don't know that TIF is the answer for urban sprawl and for those price points, because they're being built. People are recognizing, but that's the housing that we need, and that's the housing that's available, that they're addressing, those price points. And if you look at the other incentives that are available throughout the state, like the workforce housing monies that are available, and our own local tax abatements, I don't know that we need TIF at all right now. TIF should be something that's in our tool belt, that when the time comes and we've got no other development and we've got no other tool and we desperately need housing, that's when we should use it.
I agree with you on that, on everything except for desperation. I just think it for a unique, special situation if it calls for it. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it is something that we shouldn't just use willy-nilly, obviously. But so where's that bring us to? Where are you at on policy, Tim? I'm just bringing up those points that I don't want a 15-page policy. I just want to know the direction that we're going to take. If infill development, which has been a priority of every council I've ever sat on, Which it still is.
and
Still should be.
we haven't done the best job in addressing it, if creating TIF is what would get that done, then I would be willing to look at that. Because we've already proven with one development it can't be done any other way. Or with some kind of a better incentive than what we're offering right now.
But you're saying you only want to look at TIF policy for infill only, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the council needs to have some kind of direction on what it is, what that's going to be.
Why we're trying to.
I don't know, but that's one point that we need. If the majority of council wants urban sprawl and they want to develop on the periphery of the community, then that's what we should.
I don't think we want urban sprawl, but all right.
How much of the town are you gonna end up with a TIF area though, if you're looking at infill, every little infill area, you're gonna have to set up a special TIF zone in order to qualify? Or you call it urban renewal and you're okay with urban renewal?
You have a couple of areas that you would say would make sense from an infill development perspective. Where are those, Eric?
Well, the one at the end of Garden Lawn and Dale is a difficult site that's been out there for a while. I'd have to, we have some off West Avenue or different areas like that. Some of the old school sites with larger areas around them as well.
Yeah.
So
okay.
there aren't a tremendous amount of spots that would fall into this type of a category, because you're not looking at a single lot, you're talking about an area that's gonna be a little bit
Right.
larger.
Right. Okay.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to, I guess we need to continue this discussion item on the TIP policy and see if we can narrow it down. And as far as direction, can you come back with some information on, and give us some, so we can take a look at the infill areas that you were saying were the targeted areas that may be a problem?
We could put a map together on some sites of what could be considered infill, I guess.
What I'm hearing from the council, at least from a consensus standpoint, the only area of consensus that I'm hearing is in regards to the possibility of looking at a TIF policy that was directed towards infill areas. That's the only thing I'm hearing enough support that it would make sense as a group to want to get behind in a published policy. Would that be fairly accurate?
That'd be accurate from my standpoint. Infill's an issue, it still is.
And I'm not
Okay.
necessarily saying that everybody agrees with that.
Yeah.
You're right, we don't.
It's just one of me.
I'm not seeing the majority. I wish I was, but,
Well, I don't mind looking at it. I mean,
I mean, if we're gonna bring
But
something
still-
forward, I wanna have it something that fits within where I'm seeing you
Let me ask
going.
the right question. Do you guys just want to dump this for now then? Is that,
No,
I do.
No.
I don't,
I think it's a
this
good idea.
doesn't work for me.
Well, no, this doesn't, but a very simple one that addresses one specific need for a period of time until we decide that need has been met, and then if needed, we can change the one specific need to, say, a lower range housing or urban sprawl. Right now, our need is infill.
We can do this without a policy.
I know, but it's for the people.
I'm with you, Bob.
Like, I
We're-
get that,
We're
but,
talking about the economic stability of our city and our area.
right,
And it's dynamic, it changes. Now granted, it hasn't been
Absolutely.
a big deal here, but and that's our obligation as a council to be looking at those situations and find ways to address those needs. TIF is just one tool. And the law very well spells out what you can and cannot do with it. And that to me is a policy that we're bound to. And while infill today might be the appropriate thing for us to be looking at, because it's a well-defined need, if in fact it is, 2 years down the road, we might have another development that's more along the lines of industrial development. I mean, and I guess you can have a policy, but I think you ought to change it about every 6
well,
months.
that's what I basically.
But what does it do?
That's what I said.
What does it accomplish?
It puts it out there as a great incentive. It makes it aware for people to do that specific thing.
Oh, we can have, that's easy. We can have policy saying we agree that TIF could be applicable in different situations. End of policy.
And then we play favorites by saying yay or nay. That's what it looks like then, unfortunately. I know.
I don't know. who
The
you're
laws,
talking to.
the laws
I
that
don't
you,
agree
the laws
with
that
that
you're
either.
talking about, Bob, can be changed by case law. And that's, if we don't have a direction or a policy, then when we approve one, we better be willing to approve the next one. And if we don't,
I think that's ridiculous.
I think
It
it's
might
fact.
be.
I mean,
I think it's fact. I tell you, if
You're
I were
playing
in that,
lawyer
if I
again.
were in that position and I had a very similar project and I come before council and council says, no, we don't want to do that now, then my next step would be taking it to court. And I know there's developers out there that would do the same thing. So if we're not, if we're gonna pick and choose winners and losers, then, and not have a policy, then move forward with it. Go ahead.
This,
It may not happen in our lifetime on the council, but it'll happen.
this, this particular policy, though, like you said, comes down to the very end, or you, I guess
Yeah.
it's you. Says
It's
It's up to the council.
Right.
You're ridiculous.
I still would like to,
So that's why I don't care if it's.
Right.
yeah, and I agree with you on that.
I mean, if you want to have a, go ahead and have one, but I'm just saying, I hope we keep our eyes
Well,
open though and look at the
Yes.
need in our
But
community.
but it makes it blatantly clear for a certain aspect that we want to get done, instead of anybody, every single person coming up to us and saying, I want TIF for this project, and if it doesn't fit what we think it needs to, and we say no, the majority of everyone in the town will think we're playing favorites. That's just the way people think. I'm just saying it in that way. Not necessarily that we are playing favorites, but that is how it will appear.
I would just,
Unless we have some sort of,
let's move forward with the discussion, and let's not let this thing die, we'll get it figured out. This is the work session, we're working it out. But bring us back some information on that, Eric. Let's see if we can address it again. We had this study done because apparently there was a problem, and there still is, so.
there certainly is. I wasn't able to buy a house.
Well, we're about to do a development agreement. If this action that we discussed earlier tonight passes, the next step will be making a development agreement. And that's gonna set policy.
I concur, and I think it's gotta be pretty restrictive.
We read, go ahead.
As you get into those comments, not having a lot of time frame to get it, and we don't have something back from Bob Jostens. We've asked for a document for that development agreement. But a couple of the things that would make sense for you to be thinking about if you're going to do a development agreement within the terms to make adjustments on what's been requested. The developer has asked for the TIF rebate, the 100% value of the rebate that's potential to be turned over for the full 10 years, and he wants to use 2 separate time clocks. That's one that was based off of the agreement down in Fort Madison. You certainly have the parameter if you're wanting to do this, but not wanting to allow for 2 separate time clocks to have a discussion about whether that's valid to do or not, or if you just want to have 1 time clock on there. The other one, that might be detrimental to the developer, and you probably want to have a conversation with them is if you're going to consider that. The other one that you could have a discussion about is, do you want to have wording in that development agreement that places limitations on what you're willing to give a rebate for? The developer has talked about the housing study and how it talked about the need for housing below that 260,000 price cap. Do you want to have a limitation in a development agreement that you will only provide a TIF rebate if 75% of the units are below that figure? Or do you want to say you will only give a TIF rebate for those units that do fall under that cap? Those are some conversations that you as a group need to be able to have and decide how you want to proceed with them.
And that comment right there is completely logical.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point of the.
Right on.
the development.
Now, that's not where we're at now, but if you're moving forward with it, those are the things that you should be thinking about for if you're going to consider it, and if you're looking at, are there things that could potentially be modified, those are the areas. But again, you probably need to talk with the developer as you're doing that. Is that gonna be something that is viable for what he's trying to do? And are you concerned with that or not too? But have an understanding of how does this impact both parties, both the city and the developer.
Yeah, and going back to the Apollo thing, if you're gonna have, I know it's a different type project, but he wants different times, different 10-year time periods. So how does that?
Well, the Apollo he's gonna be going under the tax abatement. So if you have the tax abatement, and we establish a district, and it's there for the next 10 years, he can make an application at any point for any phase of development that he does during that
Yeah.
10-year timeframe. It doesn't fall into that same type of a discussion.
It occurs to me that it's a whole big, I mean, it's one project. That's the way I look at it. And, you
Yeah.
know. Anyway,
But it's the same way that when you own your own property and if you put an addition on your house and then 2 years later you build a garage, you go for two different tax abatements on those improvements. That's,
yeah, okay.
that-
All right.
and if you start a project and then you don't finish it,
Okay.
you've got one period.
Rethink that philosophy.
Okay, we're ready to move forward, guys? Number 3, downtown development.
Jesse Caston has been working with a couple of prospective developers for the purchase of a couple of properties in the downtown area, and I think this was kind of, well, I'll let you frame what you're trying to accomplish with making a presentation to the council.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Jesse Caston, Terrace Real Estate. Yeah, so I talked to you briefly a month ago, I believe it was, a couple buildings that are under contract downtown. One of the concerns that they've kind of brought up or had is, parking and trying to figure out parking. So I know with Jim and Eric, Zach James, Jason Hutchison, we've all kind of looked at different parking options. And just trying to come up with a scenario that helps. The company who has those buildings under contract right now is here. And so I also wanted them to talk a little bit about them, so you guys got familiar with what they do, their company, and ask any questions that you might have. So I don't know, do you have pictures, a map of like where the buildings are, just for reference for everybody? And I don't know if Joe, Levi, I don't know if you guys just want to talk, whoever you want to have, talk a little bit about you guys and then.
Hello, I'm Levi Ritchie from Y&J Development, and this is Joe Ehrenberger. We're a team of 4 developers out of Davenport, and we've got the Blau and Sons and the Churchill building under contract. So basically, with that development, between the two, we're looking at roughly about 100 units of high-end lofts that we're looking to put in downtown. One of the issues that we always have is with the development in the downtown is lack of parking. So that's kind of why we're here, is to get the city's help with figuring out an actual parking structure or land or something that we can actually use for that. We try to have about at least 1 unit per space when we do most of these developments, with some additional on-street parking for whatever the commercial and whatever else we need for those tenants. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We'd like to get that figured out first before we move on with any further of our work on the development site. We have about 250 plus units in Davenport currently that we've developed over the last 4 or 5 years, so we're pretty familiar with downtown projects, historical remodels, and that's kind of what our wheelhouse is, and that's what we're looking to do here. So it'll be quite a bit of development in your downtown that should add to the whole surrounding area. So that's kind of what we're doing.
I was just gonna say, Eric, can you bring up maybe the different parking that we had, and we could even point it out on here, of maybe, the immediate, that we might be able to get on the street, and then in the city parking lot across the street, and then looking more longer term of whether it's purchasing, the Burlington Northern, Santa Fe lot. That's probably the ultimate goal. Not only for this development, but for other development downtown or other parking downtown. And then, probably city-owned, turn around, rent spaces back on a longer-term basis. Like I said, this would actually capture probably multiple developments, but it's been looked at that there could be on-street parking on Valley Street, and then there is space available in the city lot across, I think 22 stalls approximately. And then Valley Street right there adding. Those parking stalls on Valley Street would be the other direction, obviously, the diagonals are wrong, but. So the immediate part would be Valley Street and the city parking lot, And then, you know, if the city or somebody else was able to acquire the Burlington Northern lot, that's, you know, in addition to, so that's the ultimate goal, is to get the Burlington Northern lot. We just don't know where we stand on that, so.
Levi, is that enough to cause you to go forward with just this?
With the 147 spaces, are you talking?
No, I'm just talking about the Valley Street and the lot across the.
Yeah, that's 147. No, he's talking about just the 65.
That previous slide would show it better.
Yeah, go back
Go
to the
back.
previous thing.
So you had talked about you have two separate buildings that you're looking to do. And I think when you had come in before, you talked about the Blau and Sons possibly moving forward first
How many spots is that on there? That's 50 to 100?
on the Burlington
Talking
Northern.
about the 40 and the 22.
But the question was, if you did the 40 on the street and the 22 in the lot to the north of it, you get to 62. That might be a little shy of what you need to, in order to move forward on the Blau, but it's fairly close, isn't it?
No, we'd probably more like 120 spots. in
To do
total.
both.
He's saying for both.
Yeah, and I think
We're
what
wanting to
Jim,
do them kind of, you know, there will be one and then the other, but they'll be pretty close together would be the phasing of
Okay.
them. And so we'd really look to,
So what you're saying is we need that BNSF.
well, part of our agreement is, you know, we're buying both buildings, 170,000 square foot of property, and we'd be moving forward on, you know, both the developments simultaneously. One would get done first, then the other one, but we'd probably need a commitment somewhere down there of, you know, 120 spaces.
So as we talked about it, we presented, if we weren't able to get the BNSF site, we have the parking lot just off of Main Street to the east of there, as being a potential. That didn't sound like that was one that you were in favor of.
I mean, if we were able to get these ones and those locked down with the potential of moving those closer over a time frame, that might be enough to get our financing locked in to move forward on the whole thing.
Yeah, the key is not getting stuck where we have
Yeah.
the 62, and then all of a sudden, we don't have any for the Church Hill building, which is gonna be roughly
Because
65.
this would just barely, even if we did 120 spots, this would just barely get us done even, it would be uncomfortable even at that, but if we could do that, we'd probably potentially be looking at taking up more like 240 spots, but we could probably come in when we're here on site, figure out another 120 on our own.
Where are we at in the discussions with BNSF on that property?
You heard anything from Jason?
I talked to Jason last week, so trying to be proactive, did a broker opinion of value on what that land was and submitted it to Jason to submit to the railroad. He's kind of hit up them a couple times a week, and he had gotten responses there, but I don't know if they're passing it through. So as of today, I'm not sure exactly where we're at on that. That's level parking, so that's obviously, the easiest and the cheapest way to go, if we can get that accomplished. That 56 stalls, that's gonna be obviously a city lot that's available next year, or?
Well, you'd have to do something there. Our ability to do something on that lot is building a second level. And Jesse, I don't know, Mr. Howe, I'm sorry, other Jesse, I don't know if you'd worked any at all on even an estimate of cost on that?
Yeah, the estimate for the raised lot there, if you demolished the existing building and added the lot, was somewhere around 1.9 million.
Pretty expensive.
To do the BNSF lot was like $500,000 without purchasing the property, so.
So when we talked about the BNSF lot, if you think of about 500,000 and you're gonna have 100-some stalls in there, we typically we're renting just shy of $30 a stall a month. So you're looking at 36,000, is that right? I'm doing this not the way I should be doing that. About 36,000 annually, so you're not gonna quite cover your cost in a decade, but you're gonna come close to covering the cost of that. And I can see the justification to make that happen fairly easily.
Yeah.
The other one's gonna be a lot harder, and that's gonna, if we're not able to get the BNSF lot secured, is the council willing to commit to doing a project that might be close to $2 million? That's, you're talking then doing a TIF project to build that. Is that worth it? And I don't know if that, what the answer is on that for you all. That's one that you all have to come up with an answer if that's worth it for you to consider or not. The BNSF one, for us, the cost amount makes a lot of sense to try to get something done.
That's ideal for us too, from just location standpoint, for the two
For
developments
sure.
together.
Yeah.
But the other one makes me gulp, so. I mean, we can cover it, we can do it, we have the ability to do that, it's just, is that significant amount something that you see as something that you want to stand behind to help development occur in the downtown area?
We've had our eye on that lot for 20 years and making it a parking lot. It's a good reason to pursue it.
So what do we need here?
Well, first, is there a willingness, do you see a willingness to be actively pursuing the BNSF, and that makes sense as a viable thing to secure if we can, to try to make a project like this occur?
If you look at our comprehensive plan way back, it's in there. It's I think it's the most logical place in the downtown for expanding parking. And it's the most reasonable.
I would agree.
My answer is absolutely.
And that, to me, it made sense just in terms of you're not, over a period of time, you're gonna cover the majority of your costs regardless, even notwithstanding thinking about what you're doing for bringing two buildings that are underutilized back on the market.
Exactly.
The other one, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if you said you needed more time, if not saying that you're just absolutely against it, but they'll need to know as we move forward where you stand on that as a backup. So that's one of the things that you need to be thinking about, and if you need more information from them as developers, this would be a good time to bring it out, what kind of questions you'd have or what you would need to make you feel more comfortable.
Are you gonna need anything else from us other than our TIF, or our tax abatements, I didn't say TIF, tax abatement program that we have in the downtown and parking?
Not currently, but this is the biggest hurdle right here to really move forward and get into the actual numbers and the layouts and everything. Based on paper, everything's viable, but the biggest thing is this hurdle right here before it even goes forward. So I don't know at this time, but currently we don't.
So two quick things. I think, one, what we probably have to accomplish and what they need to know is that there is participation on the parking part, on helping get that figured out. So they're on a time frame, and that's part of the contract, which I mentioned last time I was in here, that there's gonna be participation in that, whether, it's a letter from Jim or something else. It would be, and I don't wanna speak for them necessarily, but it would probably be 18 months or so before that would have to be delivered. But they would still need the vote of confidence or, however you would word that, but saying that on the participation for the city parking. And then the second thing I just want to mention, I mentioned it last time, is that, and you guys can tell me if this is different, but this is market rate and using the historic, but it's market rate.
Yes.
I would say based on the growth of the downtown right now, without this development, we would be looking at that for parking.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know why we would want to delay pursuing BNSF and getting that done.
Think everybody feels the
I
same
agree
way?
with that, but that's not enough.
Well, no, that'll, if we were able
That'll be
to get the
enough for them.
BNSF land, we can meet their parking requirements between the BNSF land, the on-street parking, and
It'll barely meet them.
and
It's
the,
bare.
And we'll be filling up all the street
All
parking
right.
too. but-
Yeah.
and then
You
there's
guys can worry about that later.
the other question's gonna be, where's your level of participation if we're not able to secure the BNSF? Because
That's questionable.
how well are you willing to look at the other ramp as a fail-safe to back up if we're not able to? Because that might end up ultimately being something that they need to have the viability to move forward in a time frame that they need to have to close on the buildings.
Yeah, we have to have something within, right around that 60 days.
And as you think about that part, again, this isn't something you have to have tonight, but even the Tama building coming online and the parking demands it's gonna have,
Right.
it'll change the needs for the spaces that are over on that other spot also. So, I mean, you're gonna, this isn't the only project that would benefit from a second level over there. It's just, is that worth, what's your stomach for cost? Again, how I'd look at, if you're looking to move forward with that, you can cover that through TIF financing. That we have the flexibility to make that happen. It's a matter of what do you see as a priority for trying to
What's your stomach?
make things happen in the downtown area.
Parking's gonna be huge as we move
It's
forward.
gonna
Parking's
be,
gonna be
it's gonna
huge.
be a significant issue. And again, why would you put money into something
Right
in the
on.
downtown area? You have some stranded infrastructure. We've got developments downtown that are coming online, but you have other facilities that are not utilized to their full potential, and it damages the community as a whole when you have that happen. There is a reason to consider it, it's just a matter of you feel that that's enough reason.
Right.
All right.
I'll consider it.
But we'll have to come up with a solution on that, and we'll have to be bringing forward something, what your level of willingness to commit to trying to find an answer of parking is.
Well, I know you can't speed up BNSF, probably, but.
Would be
go-
nice.
Go after it as hard as you can.
It would be nice if you could.
Do you guys have any questions for these guys, maybe on other developments that you might have in regards to this? I mean, I know that we're talking about parking in general, and I think that either way, it's something we need to really
answered my
take a
other
look at.
questions.
I did see you forwarded to us those development pictures that they sent. That
Yeah,
looks-
you've done a
that
lot
looks-
of work
That
on
looks
those
great.
things,
Yeah, this is, it fits exactly kind of what we do, so, and parking's always the biggest problem.
Oh, I hope you get it done. Hope you get it done.
We good?
Okay, we'll just revisit.
Okay.
It's
Thanks for
something
coming down.
that we'll have to bring back at a future council meeting. I think the questions, for the council is gonna be how much progress can be made on the, working with BNSF to try to get something accomplished, and then what's gonna be their stomach based off of where those discussions are for having a backup for you at the other site. Does that,
Yeah, we'll move forward and wait to hear from Jesse, and then we'll just maybe revisit, and if we don't hear anything from them in 3 or 4 weeks, to see what else.
oh, and keep prodding us too.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Thanks,
we'll
gentlemen.
prob-
Thank you.
Burlington,
Will it-
thank you.
will it be added as a item as option one? I mean, because I don't know if we're gonna have all the answers on BNSF before these guys have to make a decision. So I don't know if it's, that you guys have all the options available for parking. BNSF is still the number one, try to get that accomplished, but we might have to look at alternatives. I don't wanna say worst case scenario, because I don't, adding parking's not a worst case scenario, but as far as, money wise, I think that, you have to take a look at all of them and then figure out, just to make sure, because these guys have to have a letter of participation or something from you, so, if that makes sense. Any questions for me?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jesse.
We have a
The fire
dynamic-
department annual report.
We have a dynamic community. Things are
Exactly.
I really was impressed with the buildings they've done in the Quad Cities School Board.
Hey, don't you dip out before I talk how much you really like.
Oh, there goes half the audience. Well,
Don't take
Hey,
it, don't
we're
take
still
it
here.
personally.
We're still here for
yeah,
you, chief. We're here for
it
you.
was supposed to be a 3-hour meeting. They were trying to talk me into doing this another time, and I thought, it's like halfway through this year already. But since we're not at the 3-hour mark, I can have a little extra time.
Are you gonna make us to go to 3 hours? Is that what you're saying, Matt?
I promised I would keep it short, so I will attempt to do that. So I'm gonna kind of just skip through the beginning part. This, if you read my monthly reports. A lot of this will be old news to you. There on page 4, I have the organization chart as of April 1st of this year. We had a couple people leave the very beginning of 2017, and we've already replaced them. So that's our current staffing that we have there. 43 people counting our administrative assistant. Our fire department years of service on the next page, just a few things to point out there. We have about 8 people with 25 years or more on the job. And of those, 5 of them are actually over the age of 55, eligible to retire, but hanging on, they love their job. So, and I'm glad to have them there. It's good to have that experience on the job. The 2-year group there, there's about 8 of them in there. We had a lot of retirements, and we also got the SAFER grant that year. So most of them are actually coming up on their 3rd year of service here. This is something I've had in the last couple of years packets. It's just again, to remind you, the area that we cover, the area in red there is our fire coverage area, and then in the blue adds in the EMS. So the red also includes the ambulance. The blue and the red together are all the ambulance area. So about 200 square miles that we cover with our ambulance, and I'm not including Illinois. It's hard to figure that out exactly what we cover over there. We're more of a mutual aid, but we do go over there quite a bit. Our calls for service in 2016, just a little bit over 4,800. Compared that to 2014, just under 4,200. So about a 600 call increase over the last 2 years.
The silver tsunami.
Yes, the silver tsunami. You remember that from last year. I would like to point out something. If you went back maybe 10 years and found a report and it said our calls for service, you might say, oh, back then you had 4,000 calls. But we were calculating our calls differently. We had a fire department and we had an ambulance department. We had ambulance numbers and we had fire numbers. Well, if you went on a car accident and you had a fire truck and you had an ambulance, the ambulance counted it and the fire truck counted it. If you had a shooting, stabbing, a lot of calls that we would call an engine company. If an engine showed up with a fire truck, it was a fire call and an ambulance call. Well, starting in 2012 or 2013, it doesn't matter how many vehicles show up there. If it's a call for service from dispatch, it's one call. So we could have 1 vehicle or 10 vehicles. It just counts as one. So if you would ever go back in time and you'd say, wow, there was a year, maybe 2013, where the calls actually dropped off. That's because we recalculated how we figured our calls. Down below there, the call types. The rescue, that includes the ambulance calls, also car accidents, river rescues, all kinds of different rescue calls, not just the ambulance. The service calls include illegal burns, stuff like that. Good intent, I had to look that up. I wasn't sure what all the good intent calls, but
What's good intent?
a lot of the good intent are we were dispatched and before we get there, we're disregarded. That's probably about half of those calls. The other part are legal burns. Somebody sees a fire, calls it in, we go there, nothing's wrong. That's just a good intent. Fire cause for 2016. The number 1 there is unintentional. That would equal accidental. So the majority of those, half of them are cooking fires. The other ones could be attributed to candles, carelessness, that kind of thing. The next most common, other than cause undetermined, is the failure of equipment or heat source. That's all kinds of different failure of equipment. And then intentional, you would think, oh, that's the arson fires. Well, it is the arson, but it's also the kid playing with matches. It's also the person that starts an outside fire on purpose and then it gets away from them. That counts as an intentional fire. The fire types there, our number 1 fire type is a building fire. And then cooking, vehicle, brush, and trash fill out the rest of those. The brush fires and the trash fires, those do not include illegal burns. So if we get called for somebody burning brush in their backyard and we go there and we put the fire out, we don't count that as a fire call. We count that as an illegal burn, and that's under another call type. This is just, a lot of people include these in reports just for fun. I ran the calls by days of the week to see what day are we the busiest. Of course, it's on the weekend. Saturday, Sunday, and then Tuesday. I'm not sure why Tuesday. Somebody said I should run it by the moon stage and see if if that actually is true or not. I'm not sure how to pull that report out of the data, but calls by time of day, from about noon to 6 PM, that's our busiest time of day. Midnight to 6 in the morning is our least busy time of the day. Still, however, 863 calls, that'd be about 3 calls per night after midnight on average. So mutual aid, I didn't do a comparison to years past, but we're again up on mutual aid, and that includes given and received aid. So that's us going somewhere or somebody coming into Burlington. It doesn't include calls with law enforcement. It doesn't include EMS. For the fire statistics, they only include other fire departments for mutual aid. So anybody else that you work with is not counted as mutual aid. So if we would put Superior Ambulance in there, the plant for their ambulance, and maybe Mediapolis, you'd probably see another 10 or 15 calls added in there. Yeah, the picture down below was from a fire we had up on 8th Street. I included that. There's a good shot of some West Burlington guys in their ladder truck up. I forgot to say, if you want me to stop at any time and ask me some questions, go ahead. So, EMS stats for 2016, and I pulled these out of our software that we started last May, so I don't have the stats from January, February, March, and April, so this is only about 2/3 of the year, so keep that in mind on these numbers. But about 70% of our calls are advanced life support, they need a paramedic. The other 30% could be handled with an EMT. Most of those you don't know until you actually show up. But what I liked is the skills down below there. You'll see that we had 276 times that we did a 12 lead and transmitted that to the hospital. So if you remember, we got a grant last year, we bought some more 12 leads. So every ambulance actually has the capability of doing that. So that really helped us up our numbers. 937 times we did 4 lead EKGs. The 21 interosseous, I just included that because a lot of people don't know what interosseous is. I think I talked about that once before, but that's actually a drill that drills a needle into your bone. So most of the people are unconscious when we do that. Not always. If you can't get an IV and you need to give them medication, we do that. So 21 times in that 8-month period.
Wow.
1,297 just regular IVs. 942 medications delivered, so about 4 times every day we're delivering medications to a patient. 28 incidents of CPR. If you average that out for the whole year, it'd be more about 40 per year. So I know most people go their whole lives without ever having to do CPR, and there's a lot of our guys are doing it multiple times per year, if not per month. And the 84 advanced airways, that would include intubation. We have some other tubes that we can use.
I didn't know you guys were drilling in bones.
Yes.
That's interesting.
That's called a bone injection gun.
Alrighty then.
Yeah.
You didn't bring that to demonstrate on the mayor.
There are videos of people doing that while they're awake, for demonstrations. There's no way. They say once you're in the bone, it's not, you don't feel that.
You got excited about the thought of that.
It's pretty much a fail-safe way of getting an IV. If you can't get an IV, if you can't find any veins, it works every time.
When did that come out? When did that?
Oh, we've used them.
Technology?
Actually, the only people we use them on was pediatric patients up until about 4 or 5 years ago, when they developed needles strong enough to go into an adult bone. So the other ones were by hand. We still have those. You could put a needle into an infant. Those are always a bad call, but.
Yeah, I completely know.
Yeah.
I can see Chief is not signing up for that, are you?
No. Training for 2016, I didn't do all the different categories, but I did think it's important to note we had about 5,700 hours of training, or 135 hours per firefighter last year. All kinds of different topics. I got some pictures there of the different training that we did. We try to use a mix of classroom. Was that you asking me about somebody's asking me about going out on the streets. So we use Streets in Town for 1410 drills where we pull hoses off and the guys get evaluated on that. Usually the warmer weather months we do that. There's some online training. If people want to go away to school, we try to support them as best we can. We usually can't give them time off because of the overtime. But people have went to the National Fire Academy. FEMA has a lot of classes that they pay for, Colorado and Nevada. Every year I try to give you our NFPA 1710 report. So this measures our effectiveness as a fire department. A lot of it's time-based, how many people you can bring to a fire scene. So the standard there for a structure fire is from the time we're dispatched, so when our alarm goes off till we show up on the scene, is 320 seconds, or 5 minutes, 20 seconds. That includes getting up, getting your gear on, getting on the truck and driving wherever. And they want you to meet that standard 90% of the time, and we meet it 78% of the time. So we're pretty close on that. There's some areas of town, you could get in the truck right away and you can't make the time limit, especially on the northwest part
I
of
was
town.
saying the location of the central fire station isn't conducive to this, I mean.
Right. If you measured the central part, it's not really the
Right.
central part of town.
Right.
It's kind of a misnomer. We could move that and have a great parking spot right there by the. We could build a new fire station. I just thought of that.
That was good, man.
Where do we get the police department?
That's good, man. We can move that.
Lost my spot. All right. The next part is the 15 firefighters on the initial response, 16 for a commercial fire, and they want you to meet that again 90% of the time. Normally, normal staffing, we have 10 people on duty, and then we bring 4 from West Burlington on the initial alarm. So if everybody's in-house, we'll have 14. So you hardly ever get the 15 there, and you have to be there in 9 minutes and 20 seconds. So that, a lot of times either the time bounces us out of the compliance or the number of people. If you have an ambulance out on a call, there's no way you're gonna make the 15. And there I just put the makeup of how they come up with the 15. That's right out of the NFPA standard. So what we normally do is we'll combine operations, or a lot of times we won't use a ladder truck operator. We just don't have that position, or the utility people. Here's the meat of the report here. So some of our challenges is the training. If we throw in the 30 hours that we need each year, for each paramedic has to have 60 every 2 years, so 30 every year is required. And then the fire training, that adds up to about 222 hours per year. So that's a lot of training to try to get in while you're on duty. All the training, except for some of the hazmat, is all done on duty. We try to do that without a training officer. Well, we don't have a training officer. And then, of course, people are busier taking more calls. So I just want to say that we're trying to do a few things. Like, we started this online training program where you give somebody some training and they can do it at their leisure when they're not busy. They can do it on their phone, they can do it on a computer. That's good there's some training that's appropriate. There's a lot of training that's not a good method of doing training. We just implemented a new policy in January where we divided up the 3 major categories of training: EMS, fire, and then the special ops and hazmat, all the other stuff. We assigned each shift the category, and they're responsible for scheduling it, trying to get the instructors lined up. So that's better than what we were doing, but it's still not the best. The next one there is a community risk reduction or fire prevention. There's 5 E's of prevention: education, enforcement, engineering, economic incentives, and then emergency response, which is what we're really good at. So trying to find the time to have people invest in those areas is really difficult when, especially we have really a one-person fire prevention bureau. That's Mark Crooks, and he tries to draw other people in there to do some inspections, do some pre-planning. Of course, they're busy doing a lot of this other stuff, so it's really hard for them to do. We've been trying to do a lot more with the pre-planning, going in buildings and looking at the hazards. One thing that's unfortunate is a lot of times we get these people to finally agree, hey, set up a time, and then when it comes time, we don't have anybody, or maybe one person that can show up to do the pre-plan. So we do organize those, and they're computer-based, so other people can look at them later. And then the last, under community risk reduction, one of the areas, and I've talked about this before, is our rentals. And first I'll say our rental inspectors do a great job, and whenever we find an issue, they're right on it. They're very helpful. I don't think it's nothing to do with the rental inspectors, it's the rental program per se, how often we go between rentals and rental inspections, and then what happens when there is a problem with the rental. I think a couple of my monthly reports, I tried to outline some of the issues we've had, either no smoking, smoke detectors or no working smoke detectors. A lot of times fires happen because of poor housekeeping, both inside and outside, that contribute to fires. We've had ones with they actually didn't have a rental permit, so they never were inspected. So that is one area that I would say, I don't have the exact percentage of the house fires that we have that are rentals, but a good percentage of them are rental houses. Those two pictures on there, just explain those real quick. The one on the left was a house that had several occupancies in it. I don't remember exactly 5 or 6. That was in the basement after the rental inspectors came and did their thing, gave them a rental permit. They decided to put up something on the ceiling in the basement. That right there is like black plastic garbage bag that they strung it across the basement and then cut holes out around the light bulbs. Some of it had blankets. I don't know if it was for insulating purposes. They cut holes around the light bulbs. The other one there, as it was a non-working smoke detector in the house. Recently, I was in an 8-plex that had a small kitchen fire in it. It was in the middle of the afternoon. I was there, we took care of it. Pretty soon here comes somebody out of one of the upstairs apartments. What's going on? And it occurred to me, oh, how come you didn't know about this? Well, there was no detectors in the apartment. There was none in the common area. And it wouldn't be a huge deal if it was just the one family, but this is an 8-plex. The common area where everybody wants to, you teach them when there's a fire, this is how you gotta come out to this hallway, go down these steps to escape. There's no protection in those areas. And there were when we had inspections done. However, between then and the time I was there, they had done some remodeling, some painting, and just hadn't put the smoke detectors back up. So in that case, really, I don't know if Eric can speak to what our process would be, but I think they go up there and tell them, hey, you gotta put the detectors back up. They put them up, and that's how it works. But there's really no incentive for them to keep up on that, other than they're getting ready to have another inspection. Let's make sure that the detectors are up. Continue on the challenges here, our recruitment. We're in the middle of a recruitment right now. Actually, our application period ended last Friday. We got 15 applicants total we don't have any positions. Hopefully here in August, we'll hire one sometime around in there. So you think for a well-paying job that we test once a year, maybe you'd get more applicants than 15, but that's what we're down to.
So you don't have a date set for testing?
Yes, May 20th is the date that we're gonna test. We do our written test at 8 a.m. followed by the practical exam, or the CPAT, or physical agility test right after that.
And that's out at the airport?
Yeah, the written test will be at Central, and the physical will be out at Station 2. And we've been offering the physical test up. Actually, we're doing it different now. All they have to do is pass it. So we've had it the last 2 weekends. They can just come in and do that part and get it over with.
Oh.
We also do that again this coming weekend from 1 to 3. So if anybody want to come out and watch that.
What time is that?
It's tough. We're about a 50% pass rate on that right now.
Why'd you just dismiss me like, it's tough? Out of the way, little guy.
It is.
So, I know when Jim was on civil service, you came out and, yeah. The other thing is, and we all struggle with this, it seems, in the city, is having some kind of diversity in our application pool. I mean, we would really like to mirror what our community looks like, and we don't. And I'm all about finding answers to that, and I don't think anybody has a great clue on how to do that. I mean, all I will say is we are working on that. But it's not just in Burlington, Iowa. It's all the fire departments across the country struggle with this. So
I'd say something to you if I thought that you weren't trying to be inclusive. And, I don't know what to say to that either, but it's not from any effort or lack of effort on your end, so, 15, you said it right there, 15 applications, that's, I remember when it was the coolest thing to want to be a cop and a fireman. I remember those days.
yeah. The next thing on there is, this goes along with just having more calls, more call volume, more training that's required, is just the increase in the stress on the firefighter. So luckily that's not taken shape in the form of injuries, which we'll talk about later, hasn't affected that. And then the last thing there I want to talk about is the need for a third staffed ambulance. So as our EMS calls keep growing there's no reason to think we're not going to be, I know we're already ahead of where we were last year. And so every year that number is going to build. So having the third ambulance would really take some pressure off the downtown ambulance. And also what it would do is make our response time so much better. A lot of times what happens is this ambulance downtown is out, and then the next ambulance comes from Station 2 to cover the call, or comes from Station 2 and goes to West Burlington, or Northwest Burlington, or Danville from Station 2. And that's quite a jaunt. Having that third ambulance in West, we jokingly call it our Station 3. When we staff Station 3, like we had one out there this morning, well, we had the people to do that, and they take about a third of the calls, which is great. And that's not just West Burlington, it's a lot of it's Burlington, it's all the addresses there off West Avenue, assisted care facilities, that's a big portion of our calls. So they're way better situated out there to take those calls, so. And the last page here, again, I've already talked about all these at some point this year, but we're able to get our ISO rating down to a 3 in 2016. Getting to a 2 is gonna be pretty tough, but how we did that was increased our training hours, and then we did a lot better at recording those, making sure we were training in the proper categories, and then pretty much all of our officers went out and got certified. The firefighters all have been certified in driver operator. That helped. Mark is certified fire investigator and fire inspector. All those really helped out on our score. The Legacy Award, and I did spell legacy right, that's how they spell it. It's an acronym, I don't remember what all of it stands for, but that's from the Iowa Donor Network. So we received that award from them in 2016.
Education's one of them.
Education's one, leadership is the L. I could probably figure it out if I took long enough, but that was because we increased our referrals to the Iowa Donor Network, and that's also because we have consistent referrals. They check and see, are you referring all the people that you should? And they said, we're one of the most consistent and provide the most referrals. And of course, that goes back a few years, and that's obviously kind of in a direct relationship to Garrett Brockway when he passed away in 2013. So I'd give him and his family a lot of credit for that. The injuries, last year, our on-the-job injuries were at the lowest level in the last 5 years. I think somebody came and talked about that when I wasn't here. Angie Vaughn, I think, brought that up. But through several things, our fitness training, which you saw our trainers last week, I mean, we got top-notch trainers from Great River. A lot of support from the staff at Great River. When they came to us with the program, they're like, well, what do you want? Well, we want to train 3 days a week. Okay, we'll come 3 days a week. We want to do it at 8:15. Okay, we'll do it at 8:15. We want to buy memberships. Okay, we'll lower the price so you can buy it with your wellness money. So they match the price on the wellness money. They're like, we want to do it out at Station 2. Okay, we'll do some out of state. Everything we've ever asked for, they've done it for us.
Tell them we want a Cascade Bridge.
And I probably shouldn't say this too loud, but so far, and I said, we don't have any money budgeted for this, so it has to be free. Okay, we'll do it for free. So those trainers, I mean, they get paid from the hospital, but we're not paying the hospital for the program so far. And it's been awesome. It's the guys that were here, they're doing training with us at the station. A lot of guys started going out to the hospital. You know, they don't like to do it when they're on duty because they don't like to get called out in the middle of a workout. So they're going out there, and I know they do it with the police department. I haven't been to the workouts out there, but it's fun because it's police and fire at the same time. So I might have to go out. Maybe if the chief goes out there, him and I can give each other a hard time out there.
He's in.
So that's been a great program. And then also we're still working on this bariatric policy, and we've got all the equipment. That's somewhere where we identified a lot of injuries in years past. We received the Assistance to Firefighters grant in 2016. I already talked about that. That was about $90,000 for heart monitors that was actually in our budget, our capital improvement plan coming up, so we were able to get those on a grant instead. And then last year I listed all the community and professional involvement. Any group that you can think of that involves EMS or fire, we're either the president, vice president, chair, and then a lot of things that aren't involved with the police and fire. Church groups, there's a lot of coaches.
Representing.
The credit union, there's guys that are involved in all kinds of things, so guys and girls. And that's all I have. I have last page there of a bunch of pictures from this year. But any questions or?
Chief, on your coverage area, do you often go beyond that, what you have on page 6?
They go past Do I go outside that area?
Yeah.
No, well, other than into Henderson County, no. We do go up to Mediapolis on occasion. Sometimes they don't have the staffing, and they put us, I'm trying to think of the term. It's like an automatic aid where they call us, but that doesn't happen very often. Sometimes if they get more than one call, we'll get dispatched up to Mediapolis, but those are few and far between. But Henry County, no. Lee County, maybe a handful of times last year. We'll go down to like Weaver and help them out, but Henderson County is quite a bit EMS and fire.
Are we doing many transfers out of?
No, what we've set up is, Superior gets the majority of them. From the hospital, we've, like, hey, this is our hospital, they take care of us, we're gonna take care of them. We provide one crew. If they call us and say, we have a transfer from Great River to wherever, we'll take the first transfer. But they don't call a lot. I think it was just over 100 last year. There's a crew out right now that went from Macomb to Springfield. Well, we get a few of those now and then, but not like we used to take transfers, not even close.
Is that, are we reimbursed our cost on those?
Yeah, those are generally, even if unless they're Medicaid, if they're Medicare, they're well worth the time to go take them. Yeah.
The only thing I didn't want to add, any business on the extra added charge on for Medicaid or whatever, for the ambulance rides?
I don't know what you mean, the extra added charge.
Well, not the extra added charge, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a fee now that we have that we didn't have, or we upped it or something from ambulance rides. It's gone up, somebody brought that to my attention, and
No, I mean, if you have Medicaid or Medicare, and it's a medically required transport, like you have to go to the hospital by ambulance, and we bill you and Medicaid pays, that's all that you pay, or Medicare. However, if we come and get you and you sprained your ankle and you could get up and walk and go in a taxi or a car, and we tell them, we have them sign something ahead of time, it's like, if Medicaid or Medicare doesn't pay, then you'll have to pay this out of your pocket. That's the only thing that we do. There's no extra charge.
Okay.
I don't know.
well, I didn't mean to word it that way, wasn't extra charge, it was just the fact that Medicaid and Medicare, I guess, we're not paying, they're only paying, what, 75% of?
Well, Medicare, yeah, it's, 75, 80% of average or something like that. Medicaid's, it's so iffy.
I'll waste your time with this later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do want to ask you about that, because I need to get some questions back, and I
Yeah.
don't have an understanding on that. Do you guys have anything else for the chief?
Good report, thank you.
Was that 10 minutes or less?
Well, tell your guys and gals, keep up the good
Appreciate
work.
the
We
work.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Second to none. Number 5, Mount Pleasant Street Bridge. Mr. Matt.
Let's do Cascade first.
We have Larry Sanderhaus from Stanley Consultants. We're gonna go over some aesthetic stuff as well as conceptual drawings and then some estimate costs. So he'll take it from here.
Okay.
Good evening.
That guy, the patience of him to sit there for 2+ hours and finally get his turn, it's pretty impressive there, young man.
Thank you. Wanted to talk tonight about the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge replacement. Could you bring up on the screen the bridge drawings? The plan and elevation? The bridge that's out there was built as old US 34 in 1942. It's being replaced because it's structurally deteriorating. And the bridge is about 500 feet long, it's 4 spans. What we've got shown there, it's hard, you see a 4-span bridge in plan and a 4-span bridge in elevation. They're pretty close, right on top of each other in terms of span lengths. The existing bridge is a steel plate girder bridge. There's 3 lines of girders. The replacement bridge would be 4 pre-stressed girders, 6 lines of them. On the next page, you can see the cross-section through the bridge, kind of give you an idea of what the new bridge cross-section would look like. We worked with city staff to try to economize this. The existing bridge has 2 5-foot sidewalks, and it has space that was available for 4 10-foot lanes or 10.5-foot lanes back in the 1940s. Well, we're proposing, working with city staff, we met with them in early April to work on this cross-section as part of your Complete Streets program to, there's about 4,000 to 5,000 cars a day across that bridge. And there are alternate routes at grade, and there's alternate routes on US 34 to the south. So what is proposed here is 2 lanes through at 12 foot, plus 2 5-foot bike lanes, plus 1 5-foot sidewalk on the south side. The bridge would also have rather conventional lighting, and we're trying to give you the basic Iowa DOT standard bridge that would try to meet the function of crossing the BNSF Railroad and Osborne Street and staying within the existing right-of-way and meeting the budget. That's our main goal with this project. This project is on a DOT letting track for January of 2018. We decided, I made a recommendation to city staff to accelerate that bridge letting from April of 2018 because I had some conversations with contractors in the Quad Cities. There are several big DOT lettings on I-74. And the recommendation was that you might get a little bit better bids if you went in January. So we're working with DOT District 5 to try to make that happen.
Sweet.
So, any questions about the general arrangement of the bridge? It's fairly straightforward. If you've gone down the US 34, it's going to look pretty much like what you got there.
Right on.
So, okay. Then I guess if you could switch to the aesthetics. Well, that's a. Do you have there's some those pictures kind of give. I was asked to make that. You go ahead and show the pictures of the bridge. Just wanted to give you some basic ideas of what a standard bridge looked like and what a little bit of an upgraded bridge would look like if you were to choose to go forward with any aesthetic options. This is a standard DOT bridge. This was Lincoln Road over I-74 over in Davenport. What basically you get is a chain link fence and some galvanized steel on top of some concrete, a very basic looking structure. Next, please. So that's a good example of what you got. That's the Iowa DOT basic DOT standard structure. It meets the minimum safety requirements. Next would be, if you could back up for one, that's a 6-foot tall chain link fence. Purpose of that is to provide safety. It's over the interstate. In the case of the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge, it's over the railroad tracks. The requirement there is increased. You have to have a 10-foot tall chain link fence over the railroad right-of-way, and we can't put any piers or any obstructions in the railroad right-of-way. So we have to stay totally out of the railroad's way. So over the Mount Pleasant Street, on the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge, you'd have that same style of chain link fence in your basic configuration. It might be vinyl coated, but it would look very much like that, except it would be 6 foot over Osborne Street, and the properties below would be 10 foot tall over the railroad. So next slide, please. Okay, this is kind of an upgrade. You would basically just have kind of a vertical picket fence, something that would be about the same functionality, about 6 foot tall. It would be taller, and over the railroad, there's a requirement for 2-inch square mesh, basically keep people from pushing things through. It's a railroad safety thing. Next slide, please. So that's more of the basic look of a picket fence on a railing, some pretty basic aesthetics. Next slide, please. That would be an upgraded, that's out in Des Moines. That's kind of the next category up. What we're aiming for, DOT has what they call aesthetic level categories. They got the D is the basic bridge, C is one step up, and B is something like you might have on a corridor or something like that. So if you could turn to the renderings, please. We were asked by city staff to just come up with some ideas of what if council were to choose to add some aesthetics to this bridge above and beyond the basic DOT bridge, we came up with some ideas. Our landscape architects, introduced, over the taller section would be over the railroad tracks. That would be 10-foot tall, and they don't show the chain link mesh, but that would be probably some coated chain link to meet the railroad's requirements. And then it would be a vertical picket element elsewhere. Next slide, please. So these are just to give you some ideas. That's in the 6-foot section. The concrete pilaster just tries to give you a little bit of visual interest there. Next slide, please. So that would be what the transition would look like. A couple more slides. And I think the last one kind of gives you some general perspective of what that bridge would look like. So the what we'd be shooting for with the DOT aesthetic category C would be a midpoint of about 3% increase in construction costs with a range of about 1 to 5%. So that's kind of what we're essentially you would be getting some extra cost in the railing and then some concrete elements if you chose to go forward with that. So.
Are you saying about 100,000?
The total bridge project was a little over 5 million.
5 million, so 100.
So if you, at 3%, that would be 50,000 for each percent, would be at 150,000. That was, we did, in order to make a really relatively accurate quantity takeoff, we didn't do this at square foot. We did it from the bottom up at this stage. It was kind of unusual at preliminary design. We had to take a good hard look at the quantities. So I gave the city staff bill of materials with our estimate of line item each. There's about 50 pay items on there. So we're at about a 15% contingency right now, and we're right near the available construction budget. So if you chose to go forward with the aesthetics, it would be on top of being right at construction budget right now.
Bring it back as an alternative?
How much time do you have before you need to have a?
We're going into for the January of 2018 DOT letting. There's a milestone of July 18th, when the preliminary design drawings that we've shown you would need to be delivered to the district. So we would basically, if city staff told us to proceed with making the aesthetic decisions, we would make those changes between now and that submittal date.
I guess the question is, June 5th, is that the last council meeting or so?
I mean, yeah, give me a month to
So
make the changes and then get that in front of you and approved. So
that would be the next, essentially the next work session and council meeting is what he's saying, if you're wanting to have an official decision.
Could that be presented as an alternative if, based on the way the bids come out?
It definitely can be presented as an alternative. It might add a little, I'd have to talk to the DOT Office of Local Systems representative for doing that. It's more often done in local lettings than it is done in DOT lettings, but it's not unprecedented. I think we'd have to fully develop the details, right? I mean, there's an additional services element in our contract that we haven't executed yet, and then we'd have to fully detail it, so DOT, so we'd have full unit prices, basically. So the at-risk part of it would be our design fee. And then if the bids came in favorable, go ahead with it. If the bid came in unfavorable, then choose not to proceed.
Isn't this the closest design to closer to the design that we have on 6th Street Bridge?
I am not, I'm gonna have to confess, I'm from Muscatine, and I'm not familiar enough with what's on the 6th Street. I'm a little bit familiar with Washington and Central, but that we're going with a fairly different look for that. I mean, what we were kind of aiming towards was something that basically, a little bit of a conventional upgrade. That's
pretty much like 6th Street Bridge.
Yeah. The upgrade, we're saying 3% probably, right?
Probably. and
That's what we're shooting for.
if you were doing it as a bid alternate,
Mhm.
your extra design fee, 10,000?
16, I think, was what we put in the contract.
So it's kind of a question, do you want to, if you're talking about a bid alternate, you're going to spend 16,000 to have
Would you-
that.
There'd be 16,000 difference from the chain link fence to the.
Oh, no. That, the
Okay.
engineering cost would be about another 16.
About 150,000.
About 150.
Well, no, I'm talking about just, the difference between the design from putting up the chain link fence is 16,000.
The difference, the total construction cost is about $4.5 million. That's what we're estimating at this time. And so the 3% of construction cost would be the additional upgrade to do that. So that would be another 150,000. So we'd rise from 4.5 or $4.6 million to 150,000 more on top of that.
Right, no, I caught that, I just wasn't, I wanted to make sure I understood, there wasn't gonna be $16,000 to present something to us with the, okay, I just wanted to.
Depending on which way you go forward, I mean, you have the option to go with the base design now. You have the option to have them move forward with the step C, whatever that is.
Yeah,
upgrade.
the rendering's what we've presented tonight. That would be, we'd need your notification to go ahead with that or
With
not.
that,
still don't
you'd be essentially saying that you're willing to spend the extra 3% or to have a little bit nicer railings. Or you could do, based off, similar to what Tim is asking the question about, spend $16,000 and do it as a bid alternate and make a decision at the end. But you've sunk in 16,000 on that cost then.
Yeah.
If you're definite one way or another, there's no reason to do the bid alternate. If the cost factor, overall cost is that's a make or break, it might be worth the 16,000.
Okay, I'm the dumb guy tonight, is the bid alternate, the only difference is in the aesthetics?
That's correct.
But they're designed for both aesthetics.
We would design for the basic. In other words, in order to show a bid alternate, we'd have to design for the basic and then design for the alternate. The contractor would bid both.
Okay. I just figured it's almost the same thing, but, all right, it's still not, it'll register later. I just sleep on this.
The standard, we just pull off the standard DOT details. And the chain link fence is those standards are very well developed. We have to develop a few more additional sheets, custom, in order to show the aesthetics.
Okay. You guys good? And do we want to, how do we want to proceed with that? Do we want him to?
I can tell you from the history of when we done the Central Street Washington, there was a lot of people that come forward that wanted the aesthetics. The reason it looks like rock is because that's what the design committee come back to the council with. And the Sixth Street Bridge looks the way it does because instead of chain link, it's got that upgrade is because that's what the people come back and wanted. The reason West Avenue Bridge looks the way that it does is because people wanted to keep the same kind of design that we had on Central Street overpass. The reason West Burlington Avenue Bridge looks the way that it does is because somebody else designed it. But it's an attractive bridge for what it does. I mean, it was designed with appearance first. I mean, or with appearance in mind. It wasn't, just wasn't done to be a basic.
Oh, I get you.
Well, I guess my main goal is to provide you with a bridge that can be constructed within the budget first. And that was kind of the primary goal all along, is to meet your budget.
Thank you.
And basic function.
That's good.
Make sure you gas up in Burlington before you leave town, all right?
Is there a desire to have the upgraded features on that? As we looked at it staff-wise, and I guess I'm gonna have to put it in mind, because I can't remember how everyone else was, but the enhanced feature, I mean, I can see the value to spending.
I
some
would
additional
say that
funds to do
more
it.
community, what's happening more communities is something along the line that the councilman mentioned, is that the aesthetics are, we get to the point where we're nearer construction than we are now, and the aesthetics are added later. And so I guess my only, it's easier to talk about, this is probably why we're talking about it now at this very early stage than we would be talking about it later. I mean, I think we can do a better job and more efficient job if we can do it from knowing what our guidance is from the beginning, as opposed to say, getting into bids and saying, boy, we wish we had something better than a plain concrete structure.
Annie just brought that up on GIS, and it is, the Sixth Street Bridge is similar to that.
Yeah, I'd like to see us have an upgrade myself.
Yeah, I don't
These
want
bridges are there for a long time. This isn't a little temporary
Yeah,
deal.
design life is at least 50 years.
Yeah.
And the good part of this bridge is it eliminates joints at the end. That's kind of a DOT standard. The big problem with the existing bridges is it's really all the water's coming down to the east end and draining through the underside of the slope wall, and it's all spills coming out on the pavement. And the standard bridge, the integral abutment bridge eliminates that joint completely. That's been Iowa's kind of been leading the way in the nation for that last few decades.
Well, just for the record, I'm not for the chain link fence at all, so I mean, I guess I am all in on the upgrade regardless, because I just don't like that.
Me too.
I don't.
Well, I'll tell you what happened in Davenport. DOT saw the chain link fence. It was constructed. Some of those first pictures are of the chain link fence on I-74, and the DOT came back about 2 years later and replaced it with a little bit more aesthetically pleasing railing.
Do we want to replace that?
Alrighty then.
Jump on that one.
So do we pretty much have a consensus then that we do want the upgrade, we don't want the chain link fence?
That's-
Okay. All right, thank you. I dropped your pen.
I'm asking if you have any estimate on the downtime of the bridge for a detour, just as kind of a.
Certainly.
Give an idea. Of
The city staff has told us that the bridge can be closed, there's about 4,000 or 5,000 cars a day. And the bridge is currently load rated. That means there's a weight restriction on trucks. And so with the highway so close to the south, most truck traffic's gonna go around. That being said, in the at-grade crossings, there's a at-grade street crossing just to the south. City staff advised us that the city was not adverse to closing the bridge for the duration of construction. That simplifies the bridge design considerably. That means that Mount Pleasant Street is gonna be closed for about 6 to 8 months, perhaps. It would be done probably within 1 calendar year. Okay, you would start, let's say that you went to letting in January of 18, and you might get mobilized a couple months later. I think that it could be complete, I think it's realistic to assume that that bridge would be completed during calendar year 18. So the idea of closing the bridge for construction is the simplest way. I showed you a slight, we went from a 57-foot wide bridge to a 43-foot wide bridge. When it was old US 34, it was 4 lanes through, serving the Army ammunition plant during the war. And that there's just less traffic now. So one of the ways we worked with staff to meet the budget was to provide a narrower deck, a more economical bridge. And the other way we worked with city staff to meet the budget is to provide the most economical way to build the bridge. And quite honestly, the most economical way to build the bridge is to close the road and build the bridge. That's the honest answer, because when you're in a situation where you need to keep the bridge open for traffic and stage it, then your costs go up quite a bit. So,
That timetable and what that looks like.
in terms of,
If you were able to keep the bridge open and maybe put the pilings in.
there could be some demolition that would be done ahead of time and mobilization. You know, if we were looking at this, you're probably looking at a closure duration on that order about 6 months of actual construction on the ground. That's kind of my general sense of things without having scheduled out this project. But I'm fairly sure that this bridge could be built in calendar year 18.
How long would it take if you were trying to maintain traffic flow on there at the same time?
That's a particular challenge because there's only 3 lines of girders. See, back in that era, we did all kinds of really brave engineering things, and we've become a lot more conservative now. So you'd have to take like 1 line of girders out at a time, and then have 2 lanes through, and then come back and take, you could shave some time considerably, but one of the key challenges is going to be working with the railroad and keeping them happy. We can't, I think I put 120 working days or 6 months of flagger time in this project. I mean, so whenever anybody's within the railroad's right of way, you have to have a flagger there, and so my short answer is that you could minimize, reduce that closure time to say 4 months. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars quite easily.
I don't think that's even an option as far as I'm concerned.
Me either.
If you're gonna do it, do it.
I mean, the most efficient, it's,
The other thing that we tried to do or had a conversation about in regards to traffic flow, Osborne Street below it, when they asked about construction impacting the usage of Osborne, we did ask that we maintain traffic flow as much as we could both on Osborne.
That's correct. Probably the only time you're gonna be impacting on Osborne is when you're maybe temporary things for like a couple days when you're swinging beams.
Yeah, okay.
These are like 135, these are sizable beams. I mean, these are twice the legal length of your conventional semi-trailer and, 50, 60 tons.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Good?
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you, Nick.
Emerald Ash Borer meeting?
Just real briefly, I have a flyer here to put up on the thing as well, but we've kind of discussed about how we've been progressing with the ash borer on right-of-way. We're it's pretty much through dealing with the ash trees on city right-of-way. We still have a few that are being treated, but those that need to be removed are either being removed or will be in the next couple months. We do have a lot of stumps out there that we're dealing with that we hope to remove 300 plus over each season over the next couple of years and get to that. But the bigger issue coming forward is the private ash trees. We've dealt with some of that on the nuisance aspect the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of trees become a hazard, but I think we're getting into the point where we're going to see a lot more of that. So we want to get the word out that if you have an ash tree or if you have a tree in your yard that you don't know what it is, and this is an opportunity to come be able to get some more information from staff or forestry or parks department, as well as development department on what the process is in dealing with private ash trees. So we want to be able to let people know what our process is for identifying or what happens if it becomes a nuisance, how do we deal with that? Also have some contractors on hand to be able to put names and faces together or contacts together if they want to have someone come out and evaluate their tree. So we're having a public informational open house on Tuesday, May 16th from 6 to 8 at the public library. We're going to have a short presentation towards the beginning, but people can come anytime during that period, be able to ask staff questions or ask some contractors questions. But we just really want to get the word out to individuals, homeowners, landlords. If you have a tree in your yard that looks like it might be dying or you don't know what it is, certainly contact us or come to this open house to get more information on emerald ash borer and ash trees and how to deal with them.
Sounds good. You guys good? Okay. Anybody have any problems with appointments? We're grateful. Mr. McGregor? You have a map? All right.
I kind of had this conversation in my weekly update on Friday, but it was brought up last week during the conversation about the Deer Point and the impacts on the sewer from the property owner just off to the left-hand side where you can see the Circle Drive. I just wanted to throw in front of you kind of what the area of the sewer collection system looks like that is being impacted currently. And I have to, I guess, apologize, I didn't have the right answer, and the way I answered it probably wasn't correct. We do have capacity at the lift station during regular flow. It's obvious that we do not have that capacity during rain events or peak flows. That being said, how are we going to correct this? We need to do some smoke testing for one to try and see if we can try and address some illegal connections, part of the INI. Look at potentially doing a lining project in that area to help address some of the cracking in our sewer mains. I think the biggest question is, for INI issues, is the sanitary laterals that belong to the homeowners and how those issues are corrected in the future. As far as how we proceed for this development, but also future development that can impact not only this sewer line, but also the lift station, is to have in the sewer master plan address this area specifically and see what kind of upgrades are necessary and how to do those based on potential development growth. So we are looking into how to correct the current issue that sits at hand. Now, the Deer Point plans on and how they will impact the current use of that sewer. During regular flow, it won't be an issue. During peak flow, because as Mr. Fitting mentioned last week, the sanitary system should be really tight for quite a while. So those flows, when we get heavy rain events, should not impact the sanitary system from the addition of that. Now, what kind of ramifications will they see if no improvements are done to the sanitary system? I don't know if I have that answer right now. Are they going to see some of the loading of that peak flow versus where she was in the past? We'd have to look into that answer. But as Mr. Fitting mentioned last time, they are planning on hooking up a secondary storm sewer, and I think that's what needs to be clarified, is it's a secondary sewer. A lot of people I've heard talk about it. It's a secondary storm sewer that would dump into the retention pond that the homeowners are able to hook up their sub pumps and foundation drains to. So I think that should be clarified, that storm sewer or that secondary sewer is a storm sewer and is not connected to the lift station. So if you have any questions for me, we'll be looking into this issue and potentially maybe a lining. There is a lot of other areas that also need that lining too. Fortunately, we've had to put a lot of our efforts in funding towards sewer separation, so some things have been left behind in the areas as far as maintaining our regular sewer. And so things like the storm sewer at the depot and these erosion issues on 4th and North and then at Patterson have also taken higher precedent than doing some of the lining work that we'd like to also do. So I hope that answers, gives a little bit of clarity on where we're going forward from here on the sewer concerns.
I would suggest one other thing, and that's communicate to the property owners in that area that you showing up there, once again, that their sump pumps should not be connected to the sanitary sewers. I can tell you from my expertise that there are far more that are hooked to the sanitary than are not. And that's a reverse from what it's been in the past. And I would also tell the council that during the peak flows, there's only been one person that's been complaining so far that in the past, the history was there were a lot more basements that were flooded in that area, so that some of that issue's been taken care of. But if we don't get on top of it, we're gonna have a lot more people calling us, and the timing is going to be when that development starts to come together, is when the rest of it comes together, and they're going to be blaming it on that development that, once again, they're having flooding in their basements in that area, so.
Okay, we good? Thank you, Mr. Mack.
So he finds the point of least resistance, and that's usually your basement flood drain.
Mr. Tisland, any closing words?
Bridge run is Saturday. You can still sign up through this week. You can come down to City Hall to sign up. But
Look like you're hungry for a title or something.
I don't know about that.
We'll see about that.
Are you ready?
Antoinette?
Yes, so on May 13th, which is Saturday, is the 8th annual Burlington Special Olympics fundraiser, where you can watch me get a pie in the face.
Yes.
I know.
I'll definitely be there for that. Oh, man.
What is that?
Gotta videotape
It's this
that.
Saturday from noon to 8. The pie in the face will be happening around 5, something like that, and it is at, is it Roder?
Rotors last time.
Yeah. I believe that's where it
Whoever's
is
putting sticking
now.
the pie in your face,
It
they need
starts at the paddle wheel, but then it goes to Rotors.
Pedal was
Yeah,
really
that's what
awkward.
They might have flip-flopped it. Was it flips then?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I read on Facebook.
Well, I'll figure out where I'm going. It's one of those two places. But it's a good chance for a fundraiser for the area. And then also, that night then at 8 p.m. is Raise the Roof at the Capitol Theater for the animal shelter. So, and that sounds like a pretty fun time. It's a busy day for me.
You're
That's all
always
I have.
busy. Mr. Scott?
I'll invite you to another one that night. It will be at the Washington, and it's for MS Run the USA. There's a fundraiser, a national fundraiser that my daughter's part of, and that's what she's going to be talking about next Monday night, but about the national part of it. Also, I would, I want to put a thought out there for you. And when Chief Wannenberg was in charge of the department, we had discussed this, about the possibility of having a impound lot. And I haven't mentioned this to Chief Beard yet, so if he's shooting daggers at me or if he's pulling his gun, let me know. But the reason I bring it up is I actually had one of my vehicles impounded, and the company that towed it kept it for 20 days before they called me to let me know it was there. And for each day that they had it, they were charging $20. So, and that's a policy of most of the car haulers in town, most of the tow companies, is they'll tow it and they'll keep it for 20 days, and then they'll call you and let you know so that they can build up those fees, and it's perfectly legal. So, if we had our own impound lot, one, I think we could produce some income from it. Two, we could help people get their cars back faster, because we wouldn't have to have a policy like that. And we would be able to, I think, get a lot more cars off the streets a lot faster. So just food for thought. And I've got the location, and they're seeding it right now as we speak. So it's not going to be much good for anything else. It's the old Murray Ironworks location. So.
I could pick a better spot, but outside of that, I like the way you're thinking, my friend.
Well, it's not, like I said, it's not good for anything else.
I want to take just a moment, and I was going to bring this up before the meeting, that I just had other things on the mind, but this weekend, we did have a tragedy in city limits. We had a fire over the weekend, and we lost a young lady who was on my daughter's track team. I've known her ever since she was a young girl, and now she's an adult with a kid. And the emergency services, they arrived there with a great time and everything, and it just didn't work out. for her. And so we lost one of our citizens. And before we close out tonight, I just want to take a quick moment just to recognize that we lost one of our citizens in a tragic accident, and then I'll move forward. But if we could just take a moment for a second. I appreciate that, everybody. It is appreciated. Mayor Pro Tem.
When we were doing our budget discussions, we had talked about reviewing departments and/or programs and seeing what we could cut or change, or if we would wanted to do that. And here we are into May, and we have not talked about that. So maybe we could talk about, maybe start the process.
Part of having the vehicle maintenance last time, or property maintenance last time, and vehicle maintenance was supposed to be tonight, but there was enough on the agenda that it got pushed to next time, was because those departments were brought up during the budget discussion. So you'd have some thoughts on those in regards to specifically what you're suggesting. And I'd mentioned to Stephanie that we need to be prepping for discussion on the auditorium after that. Is one of the areas. And I don't know what other topics you're going to want to have, but
that's
really the reason that we've seen the vehicle and property maintenance come forward. Is
That's why I brought this up, because I wanted us to get some kind of schedule on what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, get started on it.
Yeah. The other thing for me is I have a planned absence next Monday night, so I won't be here. This will be my third meeting I've missed in my 9 years that I've been here, but
Wow.
this one's important, so I am not going to be here next Monday.
I will be there. That's all I have to say at this time.
But you reserve the right, my friend. Chief?
Well, we were kind of hoping we wouldn't have to bring this up, but I think tomorrow the governor's going to sign the fireworks legislation. At least that's the word on the street. So we've really not done anything as a community. I know most communities haven't. I don't know if they were all hoping the same thing, but if he signs it, June 1st, you can buy and sell consumer fireworks. Unless the city would opt out. At this point, I don't know that there's anything, laws or rules that we could, and you have to allow the sales. There's nothing, you cannot outlaw sales in your community. That, if he signs the bill, it'll be June 1st through July 8th, and then there's a time period in December that you can sell and use fireworks. There's communities bouncing around different ideas on opting out totally on the use, which you can do. Some are talking about limiting the hours of use. Muscatine, and I don't know, Jim, if you've talked to anybody. I have something from Muscatine that they're proposing. I don't know how far it's gotten with their council, but limiting the use to about the week around 4th of July. So, and they scaled back the hours of use. So I don't know if there's even time to pass much between now and then, or if there's interest in doing anything, or just going with the law as written. If we don't do anything as a community, we stick with the state rules, which there are some rules as far as the sales that we can enforce, but the use, and there are rules on the use. You have to shoot them from your own property or have permission from the property owner, but the hours, I think, are, do you remember what the hours are?
Grab the microphone.
Good to go. So I think Muscatine restricted it till like 11 at night, because I think it's actually later than that. At least on the 4th of July, I know it is. And then on New Year's Eve, it goes overnight on New Year's Eve.
I'm curious what the chief's thoughts are on that.
Well, the state law, as I read it, there's really not any restrictions. I mean, the use is the consumer use of, firecrackers, bottle rockets, Roman candles, but there's no age restrictions. There's no restrictions to churches, to schools, to, you gotta be on your property, but okay, now I live next to a nursing home, or I live next to a church, or, there's a lot of people talking about some of our military veterans, and, and PTSD and all those things. And there's, at least the ordinance that's been proposed in Muscatine, and again, I don't know where it's at, but it at least provides for all those restrictions. That you have to be of a certain age And if you're not, you have to be supervised by a parent or guardian. And all these, not only the time of day, but the time of year. In other words, they're gonna restrict it, I think it was like from July 1st to the 5th, or, I mean, they really, instead of June 1st to July 7th or 8th, they really are gonna squeeze it in there. But, I mean, obviously, we have enough trouble the way it is. But there's other cities that have already completely banned them, and they had banned them prior to the approval of this new state law. And so they're just gonna leave their bans in place for the use of. But I guess what we are discussing is we don't know your level of interest to completely opt out, to look at some restrictions, or to follow the state law. I mean, I guess we need a little bit of direction to see what we can possibly bring forward that you may or may not entertain. Because this is gonna be a complicated situation.
It is. But I do want to just throw this out at you, though. I don't know about anything else, but I do like and it didn't even have to be that date, but having it between, July 1st and July 5th, being able to at least concentrate it down into into a certain amount of days so that the focus doesn't have to be on it for a full month, or however long.
Location, I think, is important.
We don't have a lot of time to deal with this.
No, I mean, and we were just discussing that, looking at the timeline. I mean, we bring something forward to the next work session, that's the end of the month.
Right.
And even if we could get the public hearing notice in time, and then get the ordinance to you, and you approve it the first go-around, and then waive the next two, the way we calculated, I think we were at July 3rd.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna
that's
say,
at
yeah,
absolute best. That's at the best.
Let's see what happens this year with it.
That would be my suggestion.
Go
Let's see
from
what
there.
happens.
But there's nothing we can do about the
keep us, with how this year goes.
Oh, I don't think I'll have to. I think you just open your door and you'll find out.
Well,
I mean, this is gonna be, this will be crazy.
What's it like the last 3 or 4 years on the 4th of July? I mean,
Yeah,
what's-
right.
How's it gonna be different?
Well, how's it gonna be different? Now it's legal, because there are, believe it or not, a lot of people that go, I'm not gonna do it because it's illegal. There are.
Well, that's true.
And now it's not. Now it's legal. It's
That's
perfectly legal.
Yeah, there'll be new.
Wow, I'm
hires.
surprised that they.
I mean, think about the pets. I mean, its homes are awful close, and let alone if it's dry,
So,
what's gonna catch on fire?
My neighbor-
This isn't like a rural
projectiles-
community.
Projectiles at close quarters and.
The neighbor to the restaurant that I had on Summer Street's back porch caught on fire because someone shot a bottle rocket. We'll probably see some of that and some more
Well,
unfortunate.
statistically, you'll see the communities that have opted out and the communities that didn't, and the accidents. I mean, the noise and all that is one thing, but people blowing off their fingers and, that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, and I understand that the timing of it is extremely difficult.
I think you see what happens this year, and then you'll have something to work with, and
We have something to work with.
go from there.
All right.
I don't think we have a choice on that.
Yeah, that's.
I don't need a
just coming too
timeline.
close.
Can't get it done.
Okay, city manager.
I am running, sorry. This is a busy Saturday, isn't it? My son is gonna do the Walk for Life, and we have other kids that are gonna be out doing
The Choices Medical.
the youth jamboree
Yep.
out at the park, so there's a lot going on this weekend. I wasn't thinking about a pie for your face.
I want to help whoever's throwing it in your face. I want to help them.
Right?
Yeah, I like to be a
Who's doing the radio station? on-
You are.
No, I am.
Okay.
Nick did it last week.
Nick was on last week.
All
I
right.
showed up
All right.
because you told me I was supposed to go.
Because Jim told me to tell you were supposed to go.
What, Nick,
Oh,
what?
your note on your computer said you were supposed to. Anyway.
You weren't supposed to say
See all
that.
that, you see all that buck passing?
All right. There's anything else, city manager? All right.
Let's go
Good night.
home.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.